Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past midday. Now, a consultant to the 2022 National Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse has told GBNews that more data needs to be gathered because there is no clear evidence yet that abusers are coming together in networks defined by their ethnic origin.
Yes, Lucy Duckworth, who advised the inquiry that heard testimony from dozens of victims, says the politicisation of the issue needs to stop and that using race as an aggravating factor is wrong. Now, she's been speaking exclusively to GB News' science and health editor, Lucy Johnston.
I've heard people say, we know for a fact that people of certain origins are making our children unsafe. We don't have that data, and it's really important we know that. What we do know is that perpetrators of child sexual abuse or child sexual exploitation will come together in organised networks, and it is not defined by their ethnic origin or by their job. I mean, if we're talking about organised networks, we can see that in the Church of England. There are groups of priests who have got together to abuse children and are continuing to do so, as we know from the press over the Christmas period where that was admitted. Organised networks of child abuse are everywhere. They're in every single institution, and we have to start understanding that it's all abhorrent and it needs to stop. This politicisation and this using race as an aggravating factor currently is incorrect because we don't have that data. And it was one of the key recommendations of the inquiry that we do start gathering data so we can better understand patterns and intervene earlier.
Wow, this does seem like a big flaw in the investigation that went out, that there simply isn't the data to be able to make any of these conclusions. Well, Lucy Johnston is in the studio with us now, conducting that interview, of course, for us. That's a pretty stark takeaway.
It is, and I think what happened is Professor Jay did an inquiry. It lasted 7 years, and they hit a wall because the ethnic data is only sometimes recorded. And so it was a statutory inquiry. They had the power to call witnesses and to demand what data they could. She did call it out where she saw it, but she said at the end of that inquiry, there is not enough evidence to show that organised networks are disproportionately affect certain groups, and that we need to collect the data and we need more data, and that's what she called for.
But we do have testimony, don't we? And we do have police investigations and convictions that would indicate that there is a problem in a particular ethnic group with a particular type of grooming that goes on. We've also seen in some cases that race has been an aggravating factor insofar as some of the girls were, called nasty names related to their being white or the colour of their skin and things like this.
Absolutely, and that was called out. But what I think Alexis Jay and her team is saying is that we have evidence of that everywhere, and they've found evidence of gangs from... I mean, there's no sort of easy, organised network. It doesn't work like that, but there are... They don't have the evidence to say that it's disproportionately affecting certain groups, and therefore those testimonies are anecdotal. They took 7,000 witness statements from different groups, including the church, including bankers, including everywhere, and what they're saying is that took a long time. There were 20 recommendations, and that if we have another inquiry, they say it will detract resources and attention from what those recommendations are trying to do, which is to stop this sort of thing happening in the first place.
And yet some of those recommendations, well, all of those recommendations to this moment in time have not been implemented. One of those was to collect greater information, greater data, so that we can understand that better. Why do we think that hasn't been done to this point?
Well, it is astonishing, isn't it? That report was published in 2022, and I know Alexis, and we were going to do something on the fact that that none of those recommendations did get enacted, and minister after minister, I think the team has visited 7 Home Office ministers, talked to many, many politicians, and it was just ignored. Now, because of the attention, the government is paying attention. They are they are looking to do mandatory reporting of perpetrators. They're looking to bring in some of those recommendations. But you're absolutely right. I had no idea why none of those recommendations, because the report took millions of pounds and 7 years, and testimonies from 7,000 people who say they will be re-traumatised if they have to go through it all again and go and do another report. But, it's painful. And some of them, it took a long time to persuade them to talk anyway.
But I guess one of the flaws of the report to begin with was that it didn't focus on enough towns and cities where this type of grooming was going on, and that it did look at all types of different child sex exploitation. So isn't that an argument for there being another national inquiry that will look at more? Doesn't even necessarily have to speak to those same victims as the previous one.
Why?
When there's supposed to be so many in other different areas.
Yeah, I mean, they would argue, I mean, I'm no expert, but they would argue that what is the point? That if we do another inquiry, you may find that you may get data that finds that there is a particular group that is overrepresented in this, and you may not. But what does that lead to? Where does that go? It goes to recommendations that have been well discussed and are agreed, will help stop this. Why does one form of abuse or rape have priority over another? If there is abuse in the church, why is that less important than this?
Well, let's bring that question over to Charlie Peters, who is with us also in the studio. Now, separately, you've been interviewing the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch. But first on the question of the J report, of course, big, sprawling report, lots of issues. There is the question brought there that, why should we look at grooming gangs or Asian grooming gangs or whatever it is separately to all child sexual exploitation that we saw in that report? Catholic Church, Jimmy Savile, you name it.
Yeah, we need to do it because Alexis Jay never did it. Grooming gangs weren't actually a part of her report. She looked at 6 areas in the country where she was assessing grooming gangs, and none of them had any major prosecutions in this pattern of abuse. She looked at St Helens, Warwickshire, Bristol, Tower Hamlets. She didn't look at Birmingham, Bradford, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Oxford, Aylesbury, any other part of the country. There's some 50 different towns and cities where we've gathered data. So it's no surprise that the independent inquiry to child sexual abuse says there's no data. They just frankly did not gather it. They didn't speak to survivors of this form of abuse. They spoke to 7,500, as you just heard, but none of them were experts in this field. None of them were survivors of this form of child abuse. For them to now say, well, we've already had an inquiry, it doesn't really stack up. In 2020, when they did the 2 weeks of assessment on organised networks, Nazir Afzal, one of the lead prosecutors who achieved justice in Rochdale, described their approach as a nonsense. He said it was a nonsense. It was criticised by survivors, campaigners, families at the time as not adequately reviewing the situation. It's no surprise that Alexis Jay doesn't want there to be another review, because it perhaps would expose the failures of her own.
Now, Lucy Duckworth also spoke about the politicisation of this issue.
She did, and she said that this was unhelpful and it is upsetting people. She is a trustee of the Survivors Trust, and she's very worried about that. So let's look at that.
Every time this is talked about, people, it drives up referrals, which is great. We want to support people. It's what we're here to do. But we need to make sure we can do it in a safe, with a background discourse as possible. And a lot of this rhetoric around politicisation and around race can really inadvertently victim blame those who have experienced sexual exploitation.
Why?
Because they will feel that there's a lot of talk of we should have done more, we should have known better, and of course that translates to the victim that it was somehow their fault, their responsibility, they should have reported it. We know none of that's true. We know
Are victims
that
being re-traumatised by what's happening that you know of at the Trust?
I 100% I can say that with the lots of people have got in touch with us and said thank you for speaking up, but whenever you hear this, people often talk about historical child sexual abuse or historical child sexual exploitation. We don't like using that word because we know that for those living with it, it's not historical. They live with it every day.
No doubt that will be the case, that when an issue like this comes to the fore in the media, there will be victims of such abuse who may well be triggered by that. But if the end goal is to, I suppose, shine a light on this type of child sexual exploitation and try and better the outcomes for those people and provide justice and hold people to account who made terrible failures, then surely that's, beneficial.
I think the point is, and I don't know, but they say that there still is not a requirement to report ethnic data. So they tried, and they did call out where they saw it. Her report, if you look at it, and I have read it, I've not looked at it recently, but it did call it out. But it said that there wasn't enough data there. It's just not there. They called witnesses, they called people to provide data, and even sometimes things weren't recorded at all. So that, I think, is the point she made. And why she thinks it will just do the same thing again. Those gaps in the data are not going to suddenly fill. I
think they would be filled, actually. But they looked at one area in South Wales where a senior police officer said they had no data. Why would you choose to look at Swansea where there was no data rather than, say, many of the towns and cities that had major prosecutions? Every single area they looked at has a population of British Pakistanis which is lower than the national average. All 6 areas are lower than. So it's no surprise, perhaps, that they didn't find disproportionate offending for one particular ethnic group for this specific form of group localised child sexual exploitation, even though the prosecution data shows that South Asians in general, but Pakistanis in particular, absolutely dominate this form of child abuse. Between 1997 and 2016, around 1 in every 2,000 men over 16 of Pakistani heritage was prosecuted for this form of child abuse. To say that we just don't know perhaps points to the fact that they haven't looked at the data that's available, haven't tried to collect more, haven't pressured politicians to do more, and instead looked at, as is quoted in the report, an area that had no data.
So you're saying that she's lying, that she says there was no data there, but there was data. I mean, if she called...
No, I didn't say that.
They called for data, and there was the data, the ethnicity wasn't recorded. But, I don't know the answer about it, and nor does she, and nor do you or I. But there are figures being bandied around everywhere about what proportion of people are responsible for this or that or the other. But a lot of this is mostly unknown. We don't know an awful lot about what's going on. Could be in white middle-class groups, bankers. It's everywhere. It's rife in this country. And that's why, they said there's 500,000 victims of child abuse every year. It's huge. Yeah. So,
the more light that can be shone on all of these issues, in my view, the better. Thank you very much indeed, Lucy Johnston, health editor, and also Charlie Peters, our national reporter. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and don't go anywhere, there's plenty more to come. Indeed, after more than a year of intense fighting, could we be on the brink of finally seeing a ceasefire in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas? And what might Donald Trump have to do with it? That next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Underestimate what you did, because to do it in their backyard as well, I bet they weren't happy about it, were they, Brad?
No, definitely not. Well, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they're usually pretty dominant in a 2-man event, but 4-man's usually where we can challenge them. And yeah, we managed to do it yesterday and put down 2 solid runs. And funding was a big issue for us in the last quad, but because of our results recently, we've picked up a lot more funding from UK Sport. So we're well funded now, and the Bob is in the back of the van behind us, so we're driving it down to St Moritz as we speak. So that's how it all works in the background in bobsleigh.
Brad, you're the pilot, correct? So you're up front.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? I always wonder, because I remember seeing John Noakes on. Do you remember John Noakes on Blue Peter when he fell out of the Bob and he ended up showing the back of his backside on TV because he had a big scar on there? What? So you've got the brake man. You're at the front. So where are you then, Aaron? Are you what number are you?
So I'm number 3. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do there? Is it just a matter of it's the running power is what it's all about to get off to a good start, and then you can sit and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, that's it. So for number 2 and myself, number 3, it's all about getting that bob off the line and then just zipping it up to as high a speed as we can, basically. Getting in, staying low, having good aerodynamics and staying still and let Brad do the work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable position for them because we're bending them and twisting them into it's quite an uncomfortable position to get as aerodynamic as possible. And when you've got 6 times G's pushing you through that is not... Yeah, not
definitely
fun.
stiff back this morning, that's for sure.
Because I'm just thinking where me and Eamon would sit. Is it 2 and 3, or would he go at number 4? What do you fancy?
I would be too frightened to do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 12. Now, after over a year of bitter fighting, months of hard negotiations, a deal between Israel and Hamas on a ceasefire and the release of hostages appears to be imminent.
Yeah, speaking to reporters earlier today, the Qatari Foreign Ministry, which is acting as a mediator in this situation, said that we're as close as possible to reaching a deal.
Well, hopes were initially raised after one Palestinian official said that delegations from both Israel and Hamas were conducting indirect talks in the same building for the first time since the war started.
And in his final week in office, US President Joe Biden has said a deal is on the brink of coming to fruition. But could this also be because some of Donald Trump's team have flown out there to co-negotiate? Interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, for more on this, let's speak to research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, Andrew Fox. Andrew, thank you very much. Have we been here before, or is this the moment that we could actually see a ceasefire?
Well, substantively, the deal isn't hugely different to the one that fell over in July that Mr. Biden thought he got across the line. So what's really changed? And I think you're right. I think the difference now is that Mr. Trump is coming into power, and on 20th of January, he's made it very clear that he wants to see an end to the fighting. And it seems that this is the catalyst that has driven Israel and Hamas to potentially make a deal, of course, with nothing signed or firm in writing yet.
I mean, it is particularly fascinating to see, of course, the Americans have been looking at this process the whole way through, but for members of Donald Trump's transition team to have gone there alongside those who have been negotiating on behalf of the Biden administration, I mean, is that the fundamental thing that has changed, that Netanyahu can no longer sort of delay and say, oh, Mr. Trump's going to be a lot nicer to me? Trump can draw a line in the sand here.
Well, I don't think anyone saw Trump taking a hard line with Israel, and if that's the case, then it's absolutely unexpected. I think it also gives us the opportunity here that both presidents are going to be able to claim a win if this deal gets over the line. Both the Biden administration and the Trump administration will try and take credit. So from an American political perspective, everyone's a winner.
Yeah, and if there is finally a ceasefire in this awful war that's been ongoing, and so many thousands of lives have been lost, those hostages are still in Gaza. But I read that only Hamas have signed up to this deal so far. What are the sticking points for Israel?
Well, I'd imagine it's the fact that actually it's not a great deal for Israel in the grand scheme of things. It leaves Hamas in a position where they can continue to be in charge in Gaza. It doesn't get all the hostages out at once, and it involves a complete Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, if we're to believe the reports of what the deal contains. So from an Israeli perspective, this really isn't, I don't think, how they would have hoped the war would end. But the bottom line is the hostages have always been the kind of flanking card, the joker in the pack when it comes to these negotiations. I think we'd be seeing a very different outcome if Hamas hadn't taken all those hostages.
So essentially, Israel are being asked to let go their primary goal of completely annihilating Hamas.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, they were never going to do that just militarily. It would have needed a huge reconstruction effort or even some kind of counterinsurgency campaign. So completely destroying Hamas was never really a realistic military option. But of course, we have to remember they're talking about releasing huge numbers of Palestinian prisoners, convicted criminals, in exchange for each individual Israeli hostage, which is really what led us here. It was the release of Yahya Sinwar in the Khalid Shalit deal all those years ago that led us to the point we are today. So I think Israel will be far less happy with this proposed deal than Hamas will.
Although, of course, Yahya Sinwar and all the other Hamas leadership seem to have been taken out one by one over the course of the last 6 or 8 months. I wonder, though, how much of this is American pressure and how much of this is internal pressure. We've seen that the Israeli population have turned against the Netanyahu regime more and more in recent years, in recent months, I should say, very much in favour of getting those hostages released as the primary goal, and almost this Hamas complete annihilation as a secondary aim in the eyes of much of the Israeli public.
Yeah, absolutely. And public pressure will play a huge role in this. We've seen the protests in Tel Aviv. We've seen the clashes they've had with police on the ground. It's clearly a topic that's incredibly emotive. That's why Hamas took them. That was the entire point of taking them, was to use them as that leverage on the Israeli government to try and get them to, make decisions that were in Hamas's favour and not Israel's. And it seems to have worked incredibly successfully.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Andrew Fox, Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, for talking us through all of that. Yes, it does feel like something's a little different now that Donald Trump is only a few days away from the White House. Yeah, and we're going to keep a close eye on this one. It could well be that at some point during this programme there is some sort of definitive announcement there from Qatar, from where these two teams are in the same building currently negotiating. But I have heard whispers that, there could be something that Trump is offering the Israeli right on the other hand. Could it be that they say, OK, look, you're going to have to give up Gaza, but we're going to let you take more of the West Bank? Could there be something like that that is being, in, I don't know, what some might describe the art of the deal? There's going to have to be something, isn't there, for the cabinet in Israel to agree to this? But anyway, in other news, things are looking quite tricky for Rachel Reeves. She's going to be facing the Chancellor. She's going to be facing a grilling among MPs. They're going to be asking her all sorts of questions. She's, of course, fresh from her trip to China, but they may have some questions over the market turmoil that's been going on, the plunging pound, business confidence on the floor. That's next.
Good afternoon, I'm Sophia Wenzel with your headlines at 12:30. As you've been hearing, Rachel Reeves will move to reassure turbulent financial markets amid high government borrowing costs as she faces a grilling from MPs later today. The Chancellor will answer questions in the Commons for the first time since her return from a trip to China, criticised by political opponents for coinciding with a week of financial turmoil. It comes amid mounting pressure over her future in the Treasury as Britain's economic outlook worsens. Despite calls for her sacking, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that Ms Reeves will stay in post until the next election.
Confident in our mission for growth, and I'm completely confident in my team.
US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested Israel and Hamas could agree a Gaza ceasefire deal by the end of the week. It comes after US President Joe Biden said a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink. The outgoing US leader made the claim during his final foreign policy address before he leaves office next week. A round of Gaza ceasefire talks are resuming in Doha today to finalise the remaining details of the deal. Back in the UK, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has described meeting survivors of grooming gangs in Oldham and Rotherham as quite shocking. Speaking to GB News, she said she believed a new national inquiry should look at what she called a systematic pattern of behaviour among certain communities in the country. It comes after the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, joined growing calls for a full investigation, saying nothing less will restore faith in our safeguarding systems. And the people of Los Angeles are bracing for stronger winds as wildfires continue raging there, with at least 24 people killed and more than 100,000 ordered to evacuate. LA Mayor Karen Bass said urgent preparations are being made ahead of near hurricane-force winds predicted to peak today. Authorities also announced 9 people were arrested for looting and 1 for arson. Host of the People Politics podcast in LA, Paul Dudridge, said residents are braced for more wins overnight.
The actual expression I'm hearing from the Met Office, or the equivalent over here, is we can expect tonight explosive fire growth. That's what the potential is, explosive fire growth. So just when you think things are perhaps getting a little bit better, overnight now we are due 70-mile-an-hour winds, which will fuel a fire that is still only 14% contained after a week.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hey, here's your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. There will be some sunshine around in a few places today, but for many it's looking pretty cloudy and there'll even be some drizzly rain, particularly across some central parts of the UK where we have a front lying here. Across southern areas, though, there is high pressure, and with this high pressure, things are looking pretty calm. There's even going to be some sunshine across southern counties, particularly south of the M4. Further north, quite a bit more cloud, and like I say, some drizzly rain, though some sunshine breaking out across eastern parts of Scotland and northeast England as well. It is going to be relatively mild for many of us, especially towards the north. Temperatures widely getting into double figures, a little bit fresher, a little bit chillier than this further south. Now, as we head through into this evening, and there will be some clear skies across parts of Scotland, some high-level cloud, but not especially thick. So you may see the stars, you may see the moon, which is pretty much at full moon at the moment. Some drizzly rain pushing into parts of northwest Scotland, and here there will be a brisk breeze as well. Across Northern Ireland, it's going to be a fairly cloudy end to the day, and across northwest England and much of the rest of England and Wales, it's also looking pretty cloudy and a bit damp in places too. Some breaks, though, to start the night as we go across northeast England. As we go through the night, though, we are going to see quite a bit of cloud for many places. There will still be some breaks towards eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England perhaps, and here we're likely to see temperatures dropping a little bit lower than elsewhere, but for many with the cloud and some relatively mild air across us, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. That being said, there could still be a touch of frost where we get those clear skies and even a few fog patches too. I think it's going to be the low cloud perhaps that will be causing more of the visibility issues, so high ground areas likely to have some hill fog in places, and it is going to be a cloudy start to the day tomorrow, but turning brighter with increasing amounts of sunshine across northern and western areas in particular, and again pretty mild with temperatures above average. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M90 in Perth and Kinross is closed each way over Friarton Bridge between junctions 10 and 11 near Perth after a fire earlier underneath the bridge. There are long delays towards the closure, and as you divert, buses replace trains between Preston and Ormskirk because of a signalling problem, and trains aren't running between Dorridge and Acox Green after a train broke down. In Cambridgeshire, the A10 is blocked each way by an accident between Kilport and Ely. Also in Cambridgeshire on the A14, there's a lane closed westbound just after junction 38 for the A11 near Newmarket for emergency repairs. There are queues from junction 39 at Kentford. In Suffolk, the A12 is closed southbound from junction 33 to 32B near Ipswich after a lorry overturned, with long delays towards there and as you divert. And in West Sussex, the A24 is closed each way between Kingsfold and Capel after an accident causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 12 and our royal reporter Cameron Walker is here with some breaking royal news.
I do, Tom, and it is regarding the Princess of Wales. She has visited the Royal Marsden Hospital in London, which is where she received her preventative chemotherapy treatment. Kensington Palace, in the last few moments, have also announced she's become joint patron of that hospital alongside her husband, Prince William, who is already a patron. And she has spent the last hour or so alongside the doctors who treated her and patients currently receiving treatment. It was an incredibly poignant visit. She, of course, wanted to thank staff for the exceptional care that they gave her over those few months that she was receiving that preventative chemotherapy, for their support and for their compassion as well. We know, as Prince William has said back in November, it's been a brutal year for her and her family, and it was an incredibly poignant visit. She wanted to also meet members of the public and patients who, of course, are receiving similar treatment to what she has gone through, showing empathy as well. So, yes, some nice breaking news, I suppose, from Kensington Palace.
It is lovely, actually, that she's become the patron of this particular hospital. What does that mean exactly in terms of going forward?
Well, what it does show is that she can and is up to undertaking solo public engagements. That's been something that's been incredibly rare since she started her cancer treatment. Of course, we know that she has finished preventative chemotherapy, but her statement in September said that she was not out of the woods yet. We saw her attend Trooping the Colour in June. We saw her attend Wimbledon by herself and with Princess Charlotte in the July. And we saw, the last time we saw her in public was Christmas Day alongside other members of the royal family. But this really is the first solo engagement that the Princess of Wales has undertaken since undergoing preventative chemotherapy. I'm told that she was, as soon as we have pictures, we will show new pictures. We will, of course, bring them straight to you. But she was dressed in a long, dark tartan coat and a burgundy polo neck and shirt, which suggests she was dressed quite casually, actually, for a member of the royal family. And when she arrived at the hospital's main entrance, she said, "I was just saying, coming in the front entrance here, having made so many quiet private visits, it's actually quite nice," because, of course, she kept it all secret, didn't she, for so long? And then she did that very brave statement in March, sitting on the bench in Windsor, announcing to the world that she had been diagnosed with cancer and she was undergoing preventative chemotherapy. So I suspect it was a bit déjà vu for her this afternoon. Incredibly poignant visit, but nonetheless one she wanted to make, one she felt it was important to make. And I think it speaks volumes that she has decided and wanting to join her husband by being royal patron of that hospital, continuing to provide them with support, because it is a world leader, really, in cancer care, that hospital.
And I suppose this means we'll be seeing a bit more of the princess. This is a hint that she's perhaps entering a bit more of a regular royal set of events.
Yeah, and it does suggest that we usually find out about members of the royal family undertaking engagements usually a week in advance, and the fact that it is as it's happening that we are told this suggests that they are taking things very slowly. What they don't want to do is announce an engagement a week in advance and then the princess, the last minute, has to pull out because she isn't feeling well enough or up to it. We know, I understand, that she is slowly returning to a full programme of public engagements, but I think that's some way off. Foreign tours are off the table, I understand, at the moment. So they are just taking it each day as it comes, a slow progression, returning to public duties and, you know, taking it one step at a time.
Fantastic stuff. Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed, our royal correspondent. Well, let's go to our political correspondent, our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's fresh out of a meeting with the Prime Minister's official spokesperson. There's quite a lot going on. Hard to know where to start. I guess the question of Rachel Reeves, in particular, is one that's interesting me today. She's going to be doing a statement in a little bit, perhaps in a half an hour or so, and she's going to face a grilling, apparently, from some MPs.
That's right, Emily. Well, Cabinet's broken up from me a couple of hours ago. We had a briefing on what was said in Cabinet. The economy was raised. The Chancellor was clear in the meeting there about the issue of dealing with growth, tackling the underlying challenges in this in our economy, like planning, setting up the National Wealth Fund. I think what's interesting for GB News viewers also is that the issue of these grooming gangs, the rape gangs, was raised at the Cabinet by Sir Keir Starmer. We're told by Number 10 just now that he raised the issue of child sexual exploitation. He reiterated the government's approach would focus on taking decisive action for victims. We asked, does that mean the national inquiry, which has now been called for by Labour MPs Paul Ward, Dan Carden and Sarah Champion, and the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham? We are told the government's focus right now is on dealing with the Alexis J report that came out in 2022. We know, of course, there are 4 recommendations we know will be implemented from that, and they want to do all 20, but some will be consulted on. The language from Charlie Peters' interview last night with Kevin Badenoch, the word peasants used by Kevin Badenoch to describe some of those perpetrators would not be used by the Prime Minister, we're told by 10 Downing Street. And they won't tell us whether the PM watched that interview last night on GB News. But yeah, very shortly, all eyes return to the House of Commons. We'll see Rachel Reeves give an update on her visit to China at the weekend, and also she'll be pressed, I think, on confidence of the PM in her, and also confidence in her ability to turn the economy around, because right now it's flatlining.
Really interesting that the government wouldn't confirm to you whether or not the Prime Minister has been watching Charlie Peters on GB News and that interview with the leader of the opposition. I suppose if they refuse to answer, it might suggest that perhaps the Prime Minister has caught a snippet of it. But of course, this all comes in the context of a new poll, Chris Hope, that puts the government just 1 point ahead of the Reform Party. This a poll from YouGov, their first since the general election.
Yeah, the YouGov poll for the Times newspaper as well, I think, is absolutely fascinating. Labour down 9 points. YouGov's first poll since the general election. Labour down 9 points to 26%. Reform up 10 points, a double-digit increase for Reform UK to 25%. Tories down 2 at 22%, Lib Dems up 1 at 14%. It just shows to me how Reform UK is not necessarily really winning support from the Tories. They're also winning a load of support from the Labour Party. It shows how Labour has had a problem in its first 6 months in bedding in a narrative, telling a story, if you like, in terms of politics. And it also demonstrates to me how active Nigel Farage was over Christmas. He told me how he felt that Christmas was a period when families get together, they talk about politics, the election that happened, and maybe Reform UK came up. Well, it seems to hear on this poll, the first by YouGov since the election, that Reform now is absolutely biting at the heels of the Labour Party. This challenger party, which was nowhere in the polls a year ago, it's been completely energised, I think, by Labour's sluggish start, its inability to give a narrative on what it's doing in government, and of course 14 years when many people didn't feel getting richer under the Tory party as when they were in government.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, for that update from the heart of Westminster. Christopher Hope there, our political editor. Yes, the Christmas period. Now I remember it, because we were here.
Yeah.
And this was when the row over the membership tracker, ticker, whatever you want to call it, was. And Nigel made gains there, didn't he?
Yes. Although I think
he didn't. It was huge, right?
I think there's been more. I think there's been a more steady incline looking at various polls since the general election. It looks like the Tories have sort of flatlined and Reform has just sort of steadily grown, perhaps an acceleration since Christmas. But it is interesting that the Labour government seems to have not consolidated their 35 points they got at the election. In fact, they've fallen when that was even a lower outcome than the general election would have, than the polls before the general election would have expected.
I think you're right. They've been popular for a while now. But the Christmas message from Blenheim Palace as well, which seemed to score higher marks than some of the other politicians'
But
Christmas
also,
messages.
I think very often in politics, winning begets winning. There's something, the strong horse theory of politics. When you see a strong horse, you're more likely to want to get on that horse.
Yeah.
And so if there is if there's a horse that is doing better, and when I say horse, I mean political party, it's like what happened with Donald Trump. You know, as soon as he started winning primaries, he became a more palatable figure and a lesser figure of fun, less a joke candidate. The same happened with Jeremy Corbyn. As soon as he did a lot better than people expected in the 2017 election, people suddenly started talking about him as a potential prime minister. I think the same thing, perhaps, is happening to Reform UK. The more they do better in the polls, that almost makes people look at them more seriously, and better polls beget better polls.
Beget better polls, yes. Yes. Serious issue for Keir Starmer, though. Let us know what you make of it. And yes, we will be showing you Rachel Reeves for the first time for quite a while, actually, back from her Chinese trip. But if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you are searching for any winter sun, you'll find it in Iberia, but it's going to be breezy in the Canaries and there'll be further showers across much of Greece. Cyprus is looking fine and warmer than average for the time of year. This area of low pressure bringing some showery rain to the south of Italy and Sicily. Balearics, Spain, Portugal, mostly fine, plenty of sunshine, but an area of showers will approach here during Thursday and Friday, making it feel a little cooler.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be, and there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 1. Now, the government's proposed employment rights bill may require employers, including pub landlords, to be responsible for harassment by customers, not by employees, but by customers.
This is ridiculous. This has raised concerns about potential restrictions on free speech in venues like bars, restaurants and universities.
Well, this sweeping legislation could lead to staff monitoring conversations for offensive content, potentially affecting the academic freedom and burdening businesses with policing duties.
Yes, so essentially if you're a landlord of a pub and you overhear someone talking about something like transgender rights or something about, I don't know, religion or politics, you say... You have to turf them out.
Well, because
it's your legal duty to turf them out.
Because you have now got to provide rights to your employees that those employees cannot possibly hear anything they might be offended by.
Ridiculous. We're joined now by the landlord of the Dog at Wingham, Mark Bridgen. Mark, thank you very much. I mean, do you fancy this then?
Not at all. I mean, you know, we're already responsible for the safety and security of our staff, and, you know, harassment is a completely different thing. As to what our guests are talking about, firstly, I'm sure none of my staff are earwigging on guest conversations. And, you know, the pub is where people come together to discuss, you know, what's going on in the world. We want healthy, lively, polite debate and conversation throughout our pub. So, yeah, we will not be policing what our guests are discussing. You know, assuming their language isn't too fruity and they're not offending anyone. I think we all know where the boundaries are of civil behaviour in a public place, and we bring people here to have a good time. We also bring people together. You know, we do things like shared tables and for various events, and the debate is lively, and that's what we want.
I suppose there is a real concern here that I'm sure the government didn't mean to want to deliver this sort of imposition on pubs.
You sure?
But if you read the legislation in the most tight way, that's what perhaps will accidentally happen here.
Yeah, I mean, everything comes down to policing and who's policing it. You know, we will not be, you know, policing. Well, we already do. You know, if anybody is shooting off their mouth and swearing, they will be asked to, you know, to tone it down. And if they've had, you know, one too many or can't behave in the appropriate manner, they're going to be asked to leave already. But
yeah, because you're a sensible, responsible landlord, but having your employees sort of listening out for something that's a bit contentious, that's a different thing. Mark Bridgen, thank you very much. A sensible landlord there. It's a ridiculous story, isn't it?
Well, do stay with us. Rachel Reeves will be live in the Commons after this.
I knew.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. High pressure will be firmly in control for many of us as we go through the rest of this week, and so it's going to be often dry but quite cloudy with that as well. The high pressure currently sitting just to the south of us, and we do actually have a weak front lingering across central parts, and this is bringing some thick cloud and some drizzly rain as we go through the rest of today. A lot of cloud then to come as we go through the evening, though some clear skies across some parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England overnight, and here temperatures may take a bit of a drop, perhaps a touch of frost where we get some clear skies. But for many, with the thick cloud and some spots of drizzly rain, it is going to be a mild night, markedly milder than last night for many southern parts. If we take a closer look at first thing tomorrow morning, and while it is going to be a grey start to the day across much of England and Wales, some thick clouds, so there could be a bit of damp weather around, and over the hills some low cloud bringing some hill fog in places too. A much brighter start though across Northern Ireland. For northern England into southern Scotland, a bit damp in places where the cloud's thick enough, and then maybe some bright weather around eastern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning, but for many it is going to be pretty grey and cloudy. As we go through the day though, we are going to see increasing amounts of sunshine across parts of the north and west. So yes, Northern Ireland having lots of sunshine through the day, but across Scotland it's going to turn increasingly sunny through the day, and also western parts of England and Wales seeing some sunshine breaking through, but further southeast it's staying grey and cloudy. Temperatures will be a little bit above average for the time of year, especially towards the north, widely getting into double figures, but there will be some strong winds towards the northwest, and as we go through the evening we are going to see a bit more rain pushing into the far northwest of Scotland as well. Later on through the rest of the week, a lot of cloud to come, particularly Friday and Saturday, but it's also worth noting that our temperatures are going to start to drop again, so we'll see the return of some frost. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS.
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
To call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 14th of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, this hour, Chancellor Rachel Reeves will face a grilling from MPs, that's not her, with speculation rife as to whether she will remain in post as Chancellor. Is it time to get the lettuce out? We're live in the House of Commons.
She's looking rough after the China trip.
Where do these abuses come from? Very, very poor sort of peasant background, very, very rural.
Elsewhere, the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has exclusively told GB News that peasants from sub-communities are the ones in grooming rape gangs, and that a national inquiry would seek to identify those in authority who did not act. We'll be speaking to our national reporter.
And is free speech under attack? Pubs could be forced to ban customers from discussing controversial topics like religion or transgender rights due to Labour's proposed workers' rights reforms.
And Los Angeles remains at high risk of extreme fire behaviour and rapid growth. This as officials brace for more strong winds, hot winds that will batter the land over the next 24 hours. We're speaking to a wildfire tracking expert live from California.
We haven't seen Rachel Reeves for a while, have we?
We haven't. She was absent from the urgent question in the House of Commons last week over the state of the economy. And that was when borrowing costs really shot up for the government. We spoke to a number of experts, when was it? It was Wednesday or Thursday last week, who were saying that if the LDI pension bonfire hadn't gone off under Liz Truss, last week would be the event to have made it gone off now under this government. It was an equivalent rise in borrowing costs.
So basically we're in a bit of a sticky situation, and yes, Chancellor Rachel Reeves didn't turn up for that urgent question on the state of things, but she will be in the House of Commons today after a trip to China. Now, she came back from her trip to China with what some people have called a small success.
Yes.
But she will be asked many questions, probably about the state of the pound, about the state of market turmoil, the cost of government borrowing, whether she's going to be raising taxes again, whether she's going to be making public spending cuts. You've got John McDonnell as well, remember him? He's doing the media rounds, isn't he? Trying to give his alternative vision, saying we absolutely cannot cut any public spending, otherwise we'll have some kind of recession.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit...
He's come out of the weeds.
I mean, I particularly enjoyed him being introduced a little bit earlier today with the line, well, of course, you were Jeremy Corbyn's Shadow Chancellor, so you'll have had these discussions about market movements. Yes, of course you'll have had the discussions about market movements. If Jeremy Corbyn had been elected, I mean, it wouldn't have just been a Liz Truss event, it would have been a Liz Truss event times a million.
Free Wi-Fi for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure that the international creditors of the UK government would have taken that absolutely lying down. They wouldn't. But this is a crucial moment. I mean, how will Rachel Reeves respond to these questions from the Shadow Chancellor, to these questions, actually, these calls for her to resign from her position? We'll be watching that with great intent. All to come after your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Princess of Wales has made a surprise visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital to thank staff who looked after her during her cancer treatment. Princess Kate also met other patients at the London hospital. The visit marks the first confirmation of where she was treated. A Kensington Palace spokesperson said the Princess wanted to make the journey to both to show her gratitude to the incredible team, but also to highlight the world-leading care and treatment the Marsden provides. Catherine is now becoming the hospital's joint royal patron, with her husband, Prince William, already a patron. Rachel Reeves will move to reassure turbulent financial markets as she faces a grilling from MPs in the next few minutes. The Chancellor will answer questions in the Commons for the first time since her return from a trip to China, criticised by political opponents for coinciding with a week of financial turmoil. It comes amid mounting pressure over her future in the Treasury as Britain's economic outlook worsens. Despite calls for her sacking, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that Ms Reeves will stay in post until the next election.
I'm confident in our mission for growth, and I'm confident, completely confident in my team.
Meanwhile, Shadow Financial Secretary Gareth Davies told GB News it's not going well for Rachel Reeves.
This is a government that inherited, after a pretty difficult time in the economy that was turning the corner. Inflation was back down to 2%, the deficit was half that it was in 2010, and the economy was growing. But because of the budget, because of the choices that were made at that budget, we've seen taxes go up by 40 billion, which is hurting business confidence and growth, and those costs will be passed on to consumers through higher inflation. We've seen growth downgraded by the OBR, and debt is going up. And so investors are now walking with their feet.
In other news, US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested Israel and Hamas could agree a Gaza ceasefire by the end of the week. It comes after US President Joe Biden said a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink. The outgoing US leader made the claim during his final foreign policy address before he leaves office next week. A round of Gaza ceasefire talks are resuming in Doha today to finalise the remaining details of the deal. Back in the UK, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has described meeting survivors of grooming gangs in Oldham and Rotherham as quite shocking. Speaking to GB News, she said she believed a new national inquiry should look at what she called a systematic pattern of behaviour among certain communities in the country. It comes after the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, joined growing calls for a full investigation, saying nothing less will restore faith in our safeguarding systems. The people of Los Angeles are bracing for stronger winds as wildfires continue raging, with at least 24 people killed and more than 100,000 ordered to evacuate. LA Mayor Karen Bass said urgent preparations are being made ahead of near hurricane-force winds predicted to peak today. Authorities also announced 9 people were arrested for looting and 1 for arson. Host of the People Politics podcast in Los Angeles, Paul Duddridge, said residents are braced for more winds overnight.
The actual expression I'm hearing from the Met Office, or the equivalent over here, is we can expect tonight explosive fire growth. That's what the potential is, explosive fire growth. So just when you think things are perhaps getting a little bit better, overnight now we are...
And we can take you live now to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who's speaking in Parliament.
Land Rover and AstraZeneca, who will benefit from the steps that we have agreed. We have worked to lift market access barriers across a range of goods and services, particularly in the agri-food sector. On financial services, we have successfully secured new licences and quota allocations for UK firms to improve operating access in China. And we agreed to cooperate further, including by renewing our shared commitment to the UK-China Stock Connect scheme, first launched in 2019, deepening our cooperation on wealth management through a UK-China Wealth Connect scheme, and progressing initiatives on pensions and sustainable finance, delivering significant benefits for UK firms and for the City of London. I'm pleased that China agreed to issue its first ever overseas sovereign green bond in London during 2025, underlining the UK's position as a global capital for high-quality, sustainable finance. Mr. Speaker, the UK is a global leader in financial services, and there are significant opportunities to expand our presence in new markets. The tangible outcomes that we have delivered this week will help to deliver that. These steps are part of a wider programme, making substantive progress in improving arrangements for UK exporters and investors. This is reflected in new agreements on vaccine approvals, fertiliser, whisky labelling, legal services, automotives and accountancy, which has set us on course for this dialogue to unlock £1 billion of value for the UK economy. These outcomes, agreed with my counterpart, Vice Premier He Lifeng, represent pragmatic cooperation in action, and they support secure and resilient economic growth. Because security and economic growth go hand in hand. This means finding the right way to build a stable and balanced relationship with China in our national interest. One that recognises the importance of cooperation in addressing the global issues we face, competing where our interests differ, and challenging robustly whenever that is required. In Beijing and Shanghai, I was clear that whilst we must cooperate on areas of mutual interest, we will confidently challenge on areas where we disagree. I expressed our country's real economic and trade concerns to the Chinese, including trade imbalances and economic security. And I raised concerns about Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, human rights and restrictions on rights and freedoms in Hong Kong, including the case of Jimmy Lai and the completely unjustified sanctions against British parliamentarians. A key outcome of this dialogue is that we have secured China's commitment to improve existing channels so that we can openly discuss sensitive issues and the ways in which they impact our economy. Because if we do not engage with China, we cannot raise our real concerns. This dialogue is just one part of our engagement with trading partners right across the world. Since becoming Chancellor, I've been to New York, Washington, Toronto and Brussels to build our global economic relationships, whilst my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, has travelled to the Gulf to boost trade and investment. And my right honourable friend, the Home Foreign Secretary, is engaging with partners all over the world to deliver growth which benefits people across the United Kingdom. Because we must continue to go further and faster in driving economic growth to make working people better off. That is why yesterday the Prime Minister launched our AI Opportunities Action Plan to throw the full weight of government behind artificial intelligence in the UK, revolutionising our public services and making our economy more productive. It is why next week I will be meeting with business leaders, investors and entrepreneurs.
Well, we've been listening to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, deliver her update on her China visit and assessment on the UK economy. Of course, some turmoil in the markets over while she was away. Our political editor, Chris Hope, is on the line. Chris, I do apologise. We will interrupt you when... actually, I think we're about to hear some questions. We're going to go back live to the House of Commons. Apologies.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Can I at the outset say it is good to see the Chancellor in her place and to thank her for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, I know that the Chancellor has been away, So let me update her on the mess that she left behind. The pound has hit a 14-month low. Government borrowing costs are at a 27-year high. Growth has been killed stone dead. Inflation is rising, impacting millions. Interest rates are staying higher for longer, and business confidence has fallen through the floor. The party opposite talked down the economy. They crippled businesses with colossal taxes, breaking all their promises. This is a crisis made in Downing Street. And, Mr. Speaker, it should hardly surprise the Chancellor that international markets are uneasy. The UK's long-term borrowing costs have risen to their highest in almost 30 years. But while the government was losing control of the economy, Mr. Speaker, where was the Chancellor? Her trip to China had not even begun when my urgent question was taken in the House last week. She was still in the country, but she sent the Chief Secretary rather than face up to her own failures. So can I ask the Right Honourable Lady why she chose not to respond herself? Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor, of course, ducked the difficult questions by jetting off to Beijing. I believe that in Labour circles they are calling it the Peking duck, Mr. Speaker. Well, whatever was on the menu in China, was it really worth the unedifying sight of an increasingly desperate politician scampering halfway around the world with a begging bowl? Was it really worth it? The Chancellor's deal pales in comparison to Labour's black hole, which has opened up in the public finances while the Right Honourable Lady was absent from her station. To give a sense of scale, Mr. Speaker, the deal the Chancellor has announced amounts to £120 million per year. The rise in our borrowing costs due to her disastrous budget has added around £12 billion to our annual spending on debt interest alone. Literally 100 times what she says she has brought back from Beijing. That is money that cannot now go on the public's priorities. 12 billion is enough to pay for 300,000 nurses, to cover Labour's pernicious winter fuel payments cut for 8.5 years. And of course, even before this latest market reaction, the budget meant spending tens of billions more in servicing our debt. Terrible. According to the OBR forecast, 2/3 of the money raised from the Chancellor's jobs tax will be swallowed up by additional debt interest. Forget those billions going on better public services. They are going on paying the price of Labour's mismanagement. And we on this side know how this sorry story goes. We have seen it, Mr. Speaker. We have seen it all before. Socialist governments that think they can tax and spend their way to prosperity. Labour governments that simply do not understand that if you tax the living daylights out of business, you will get stagnation. They do not understand, Mr. Speaker, because there's barely a shred of business experience on the front bench opposite. And can I ask the Right Honourable Lady, which of her promises will she break if in March the OBR judge that she is now in breach of her own fiscal rules? Will she cancel promised spending? Will she ramp up borrowing? Or will she raise taxes yet again? Mr. Speaker, this whole sorry tale is nothing short of a Shakespearean tragedy, playing out before our eyes. This is the Hamlet of our time. They promised the electorate much while pouring the poison into their ear. At the end, you can feel the end. The Chancellor flailing, estranged it seems from those closest to her, those about her falling, the drums beating ever closer. To go or not to go, that is now a question. The Prime Minister will be damned if he does, but he will surely be damned if he does not. The British people deserve better.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor is simply not serious. I mean, I've been on that side for 14 years. I think that usually when you have a statement, you ask some questions. Now, we heard a lot from the Right Honourable gentleman about what he wouldn't do. But we've heard absolutely nothing about what he would do. Now, you can now see what happens when the leader of the opposition tells the shadow cabinet they shouldn't have any policies. Because, as far as I can tell, the Conservative Party's economic strategy is to say that the UK should not engage with the second largest economy in the world. Or indeed with our nearest neighbours and our biggest trading partners in the European Union. His economic strategy is to support higher spending, but none of the right decisions that are required to deliver sound public finances. And his economic strategy is to ignore the mistakes of the past, with no apology to the British people for his part in Liz Truss's mini-budget that crashed the economy. Now, I mentioned Liz Truss's mini-budget, but I appreciate that, having said that, I may now receive a cease and desist letter from her later. Now, the one question that the Shadow Chancellor did ask was, why did I go to China? Well, I went to secure tangible benefits for British businesses trading overseas. And the Shadow Chancellor said, well, it wasn't worth it. Well, you say that to HSBC, to Standard Chartered, Prudential, Schroders and the London Stock Exchange, who attended those meetings with me last week and have all said about the difference that it will make. Now, I have been under no illusion about the scale that we face. After 14 years of stagnant economic growth, higher debt and economic uncertainty. And we have seen global economic uncertainty play out in the last week. But leadership is not about ducking these challenges. It is about rising to them. The economic headwinds that we face are a reminder that we should, indeed we must, go further and faster in our plan to kickstart economic growth that plunged under the last government. By bringing stability to the public finances after years of instability under the party opposite, unlocking investment that plummeted under the previous government, and pushing ahead with the essential reforms to our economy and public services. That is my message to the House today. Because if we get it right, the prize on offer to us, to the British people, is immense. The opportunity to make working people off by making Britain better off. That is the mandate that this government has, and this is what we will deliver.
Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's commitment to growth in this country and to encourage investment in the UK. Listening, though, to the Shadow Chancellor, you'd think that the country was going to hell in a handcart. And doesn't she agree with me that there is no time for panic? That it is perfectly possible.
Apologies to Dame Meg Hillier. We're going to pull away from the House of Commons for the moment and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who was listening to that remarkable exchange between the Chancellor and the Shadow Chancellor. Chris, what was your main takeaway?
Yes, hi Tom, hi Emily, that's right. Well, I'm looking at the optics of that scene in the House of Commons with cabinet ministers grouped around the Chancellor. Now, just yesterday, a day ago, the PM would not say whether she would be the Chancellor at the next election. When I asked directly, yes or no, will she be there? That was clarified in the evening briefing, or the late afternoon briefing with Downing Street, to say that she would be Chancellor at the time of the next general election. And it came up in the cabinet meeting in the building behind me, 10 Downing Street, about 2 or 3 hours ago. The economy was raised, and the Chancellor made clear that her government wants to tackle the underlying challenges, as well as setting up a new national wealth fund, and we'll hear more of that, I think, later this week. But no question, I mean, the issue of confidence didn't come up in the cabinet today. But Rachel Reeves certainly getting a pummeling there from Mel Stride, scampering around the world with a begging bowl. He said it's a crisis made in Downing Street. He also said that her tax-raising budget, £40 billion raised, of course, back in October budget. He said that's increased our debt obligations by 12 billion, wiping out the headroom. And he said the big question, I think, which will set the tone for the next two months or so, is what will you cut in that update from the OBR on the 26th of March? Will you go after the benefits budget? Will you be able to have to push out the target of getting to 2.5% of spending of GDP on defence further to make sure we don't break the fiscal rule? We were told and have been told by the PM repeatedly that there are no plans for more big tax rises. So what can she do? Now, her reply was the Chancellor's not being serious. Why wouldn't you want to speak to the second biggest economy in the world after that visit to China at the weekend? But no question, she's under pressure right now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Not to focus on the trivial, Christopher, but did you hear him call her a Peking duck? There was some joke about Peking duck that seems to be picked up, but I didn't quite catch it myself. Did you?
I didn't in my it's a bit distorted my piece here from Downing Street. But I can check that out for you.
Yes, I think he called her a Peking duck.
He said that was the word in Labour circles, that she is being known as a Peking duck.
Right, OK.
It was on the menu.
A play on the Chinese trip.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Christopher Hope. We're now going to turn to the former Conservative Member of Parliament, Tobias Ellwood, for more on this, but also a bit more on the international situation. Because, Tobias, do you think it was a good idea for the Chancellor to dash off to China while, let's face it, there has been market turmoil?
Yeah, well, good afternoon. I can understand why it's very easy to pick on somebody in these times, saying, oh, my goodness, they've just done a runner to China. I can say from being a Foreign Office Minister, these are not defending the Chancellor, but these visits are planned well in advance. And I think it's just unfortunate
in the budget, decisions that the Liberal Democrats
suddenly she is seen to depart. My bigger concern about China, and we've discussed this in the past, is the absence of a strategy of what we're doing about a country that is reinterpreting the global order and taking countries with it that are actually openly challenging the way we do business on the international stage. Globalization is starting to fragment. So absolutely talk to China, stand up to China, and 10% of our GDP is affected by China. But certainly we move away from anything to do with security because we can't trust China. But ultimately, the bigger picture issue is to what is our strategy to deal in the next 10, 15 years when China will dominate and overtake, arguably, America economically, technologically, and militarily as well. So these are the bigger questions that are perhaps above the Chancellor's pay grade. It should be the Prime Minister, along with the United States President, that are considering these things.
And Tobias, Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, he said that her deal with China may bring in £120 million per year, but the rises in the cost of government borrowing will cost us £12 billion in annual spending just on debt interest. I mean, that is a huge sum.
Yeah, the debt interest is very important indeed. It's, as much as we spend on defence now, very, very concerning that just to borrow the money that we owe back to the banks is costing us, the interest alone is getting out of control. And the Shadow Chancellor is right to raise these concerns. It is odd that after 14 years, we're not seeing a better plan from Labour. We're seeing inflation starting to rise again, pound falling in value. The economy is struggling as well. We're also seeing this thing called stagflation, a prolonged period of slow economic growth accompanied by high unemployment. These are very, very difficult times indeed. And to balance the books, what do you do? Do you raise taxes or do you cut spending? This is the question that Mel Stride was asking today. Or do you actually improve growth by making Britain more attractive to do business in? So, broaden the cake, if you like. And I don't see enough of that happening either. I would stress, we ask ourselves in a very fast changing world, ever more competitive, what is Britain good at? Well, we are the third largest high-tech superpower in the world. That's what we're good at. And I would like to see us do more on being more assertive about that. Creative industries, life sciences, fintech, financial services, pharmaceuticals, AI was mentioned a couple of days ago. But let's just invigorate that to say, we as Britain, what do we do today in today's day and age? That's where we can be competitive on the international stage. That's where all our efforts must go into, and how we educate people and where we're going in the longer term. That is what's going to help make Britain much, much stronger. That's what's going to help improve our economy. That's what's going to help increase prosperity.
It does seem that we're entering a period of instability, not only financially, but also politically. I mean, we've seen a poll out this week that shows 3 parties, all much of a muchness, Reform just 1 point ahead, or behind, I should say, of the Labour Party, and the Tories a couple of points behind that. I mean, I suppose we're entering this deeply unstable period financially and politically, and that doesn't really necessarily give us a clear way out.
No, you make such an important point. But if I can add to what you're saying, also security-wise, I argue that 2025 will be the year of grey zone warfare, where we're going to be attacked almost daily, as we are at the moment, in different levels. We're going to see the light potentially go out. We're going to see a major cyber attack take place in the UK. That is where our world is going. Now, if that, on top of the things that you mentioned about the political uncertainty, then we are in for a very, very dangerous time indeed. We need to, as Chris Hope was just touching on there, spend more on defence. Donald Trump will demand it of Britain when he gets into office, and we're still quibbling about whether to spend 2.5% or 3%.
We're just spending $12 billion more on debt interest than we were before. The Chancellor is looking everywhere for spending cuts or more tax rises at the spending review in just a couple of months' time. Where's she going to find the money for extra money on defence?
Well, I make the point very, very clearly indeed that our security and our economy are symbiotically interlinked. So half of our GDP is affected by international headwinds. So if things go wrong in the Middle East or in Eastern Europe and so forth, it has a knock-on impact on our economy. And ever fewer nations are standing up to the widening threats that we're now experiencing. If Britain doesn't step up, then who will? So you make a strong point. Where is the money going to come from? I say if you don't spend it on security, our economy will be hit even further, affecting every single department, not just defence.
Now, you've served as a minister, you've served in government. What do you think when it comes to Rachel Reeves? Do you think she'll last?
Well, whenever you hear the Prime Minister say those famous words, I have confidence in my minister, then that does often herald a reshuffle. He has come out and said very, very clearly that she's got the job now for the rest of Parliament. It would be very, very dangerous, I'm afraid. I mean, not to go back into that rather dark period for the Conservatives, but when Liz Truss threw Kwasi Kwarteng under the bus, the number 11 and number 10 must work, again, use that word symbiotically, they must work together. This is as much as the Prime Minister's plan as it is the Chancellor's. So getting rid of the Chancellor somehow to sort of clear the decks, if you like, would be the wrong strategy. We need a stronger determination as to where our economy is going at the moment. Maybe we'll hear it in the debate today.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Tobias Ellwood, for being so flexible with us on the timings there. Former Defence Minister, fantastic stuff. Yes, that is probably true, that if Keir Starmer were to demote Rachel Reeves, then that would reflect very badly on his decision-making and on his government.
Although Boris Johnson did it to Saj.
Yes, actually, yes.
Sajid Javid was booted out as Chancellor after only a few months in number 11, and Rishi Sunak came in, although perhaps Boris Johnson regrets that now. Who's to say?
Yes, he did rise up the career ladder very quickly, didn't he, Rishi Sunak?
As soon as the knives are out in either direction. I mean, perhaps Rishi Sunak sort of getting the job as Chancellor because someone was knifed, perhaps then was sharpening his, or that's the Boris camp's view. I'm sure Rishi Sunak would take a very different position on that, but it does seem that it was a particularly knifey time in the Conservative
The Tories
Party.
are very knifey, aren't they?
Yeah, much more than the Labour Party. Labour doesn't get rid of its leaders. I mean, Neil Kinnock had to lose 2 elections before he went. Jeremy Corbyn had to lose 2 elections before he went. Ed Miliband, there was talk of whether or not he'd be kicked out, but they made him go on and lose an election before he went. I mean, the Labour Party are a lot more sticky with their leadership than the Tories.
Yet to see with Reform. Could Nigel? Could there be the knives out for Nigel
Reform
Farage?
members aren't allowed to get rid of Nigel Farage.
Not yet, anyway. There's going to be some more democratising.
Yeah, not that they'd want to. I
don't think they'd want to.
We've seen the polling, but...
Anyway, we're going to have some more reaction. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's not ducking the economic challenges facing the United Kingdom. More on that after the headlines with Sophia.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. Your headlines at 1:32. Rachel Reeves has faced a grilling from MPs in the Commons as she delivered a statement on her recent trip to China, criticised by political opponents for coinciding with a week of financial turmoil. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride slammed Miss Reeves for disappearing to China and updated her, the Chancellor, on the mess she has left behind, calling the economic situation a crisis made in Downing Street. Despite calls for her sacking, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that Miss Reeves will stay in post until the next election. But Mr Stride finished his questioning, referring to the Chancellor's situation to Hamlet, saying to go or not to go, that is the question. Now, US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested Israel and Hamas could agree a Gaza ceasefire by the end of the week. It comes after US President Joe Biden said a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink. The outgoing US leader made the claim during his final foreign policy address before he leaves office next week. A round of Gaza ceasefire talks are resuming in Doha today to finalise the remaining details of the deal. Back in the UK, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has described meeting survivors of grooming gangs in Oldham and Rotherham as quite shocking. Speaking to GB News, she said she believed a new national inquiry should look at what she called a systematic pattern of behaviour among certain communities in the country. It comes after the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, joined growing calls for a full investigation, saying nothing less will restore faith in our safeguarding systems. The people of Los Angeles are bracing for stronger winds as wildfires continue raging, with at least 24 people killed and more than 100,000 ordered to evacuate. LA Mayor Karen Bass said urgent preparations are being made ahead of near hurricane-force winds predicted to peak today. Authorities also announced 9 people were arrested for looting and 1 for arson. And the Princess of Wales has made a surprise visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital to thank staff who looked after her during her cancer treatment. Princess Kate also met other patients at the London hospital. The visit marks the first confirmation of where she was treated. A Kensington Palace spokesperson said the Princess wanted to make the journey to both show her gratitude to the incredible team, but also to highlight the world-leading care and treatment that Marsden provides. Catherine is now becoming the hospital's joint patron, alongside her husband, Prince William, already a patron. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hey, here's your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. There will be some sunshine around in a few places today, but for many it's looking pretty cloudy and there'll even be some drizzly rain, particularly across some central parts of the UK where we have a front lying here. Across southern areas, though, there is high pressure, and with this high pressure, things are looking pretty calm. There's even going to be some sunshine across southern counties, particularly south of the M4. Further north, quite a bit more cloud, and like I say, some drizzly rain, though some sunshine breaking out across eastern parts of Scotland and northeast England as well. It is going to be relatively mild for many of us, especially towards the north. Temperatures widely getting into double figures, a little bit fresher, a little bit chillier than this further south. Now, as we head through into this evening, and there will be some clear skies across parts of Scotland, some high-level cloud, but not especially thick. So you may see the stars, you may see the moon, which is pretty much at full moon at the moment. Some drizzly rain pushing into parts of northwest Scotland, and here there will be a brisk breeze as well. Across Northern Ireland, it's going to be a fairly cloudy end to the day, and across northwest England and much of the rest of England and Wales, it's also looking pretty cloudy and a bit damp in places too. Some breaks, though, to start the night as we go across northeast England. As we go through the night, though, we are going to see quite a bit of cloud for many places. There will still be some breaks towards eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England perhaps, and here we're likely to see temperatures dropping a little bit lower than elsewhere, but for many with the cloud and some relatively mild air across us, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. That being said, there could still be a touch of frost where we get those clear skies and even a few fog patches too. I think it's going to be the low cloud perhaps that will be causing more of the visibility issues, so high ground areas likely to have some hill fog in places, and it is going to be a cloudy start to the day tomorrow, but turning brighter with increasing amounts of sunshine across northern and western areas in particular, and again pretty mild with temperatures above average. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. The M90 in Perth and Kinross is closed each way over Friarton Bridge between junctions 10 and 11 between Craigend and Perth after a fire underneath the bridge earlier. There are delays towards the closure and as you divert. The M80 in North Lanarkshire is blocked each way at junction 5, the Lowood junction at Cumbernauld causing queues. Train services in the West Midlands aren't running between Tyseley and Lapworth after a freight train broke down. In Warwickshire, the A5 is partly blocked for emergency repairs between Penny Drayton and Caldecote causing delays. In Cambridgeshire, the A10 is closed each way between Littleport and Ely after an accident. On the M23 in Surrey, there's a lane closed southbound for emergency repairs between junctions 8 and 9 from the M25 to Gatwick Airport, slow as a result. And from Surrey into West Sussex, the A24 is closed each way between Capel and Kingsfold after an accident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 38 minutes past 1, and we've been following this remarkable debate in the House of Commons this afternoon. Rachel Reeves' first public appearance since her China trip, although, as the Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride made the point, she was actually still in the United Kingdom when she refused to turn up for the urgent question last week on the turmoil in the market. So this, her first opportunity to be grilled.
It's true, actually. She could have turned up for that urgent question rather than sending her deputy. She absolutely could have done. Or is she packing her bags, getting her notes sorted for China?
Or ducking and avoiding what was a perilous moment and a deeply politically damaging moment. I mean, for the borrowing costs to jump in a similar way that we saw under Liz Truss, under a Chancellor who has made her entire brand about stability, only to then preside over turmoil in the markets. I mean, it is deeply, deeply damaging. There's no way of getting around it.
Tom, I can't get over the fact that apparently, according to Mel Stride at least, we will be spending £12 billion more per year just paying interest on debt. So we're not getting anything for that. We're not getting a new school, we're not getting a new hospital, we're not getting more defence, just on debt interest. £12 billion a year. We're crippling ourselves.
It is an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, if you think about all of the spending announcements that the government has announced in the last few years, you look at the Labour manifesto. I mean, it was only promising to spend around £4 or £5 billion extra, you know, £2 billion more on the NHS, this sort of stuff. Of course, they changed their minds in the budget and spent much more. But given that we talk normally in sort of hundreds of millions or low billions, £12 billion extra
Makes you
in
want
debt
to weep,
interest.
doesn't it? It makes you want to weep for the state of the country.
It really
that we're
does.
spending that much on the interest on our borrowing, on our debt.
It must be said that other countries have experienced a rise in debt interest costs as well, but the UK is on the outer bounds of that spread. So everyone is paying more, but some people are paying less proportionally. Do you see what I mean?
So we're not the very worst, but we're pretty bad in the whole scale of things.
We're among the worst. We're among the
lovely.
worst of the major developed economies. Yeah.
Nice to be among the worst of the major developing countries when it comes to debt interest. But it's tricky. I mean, Mel Stride did, you know, pick up on the pound plunging to a 14-month low, 27-year high for borrowing costs, growth at zero, inflation up. Also, interest rates could go up or at least remain where they are for much longer than we'd hoped. That's a tricky picture.
It is grim, and this is why I think this statement has been quite so electric in the House of Commons. I wonder if the Chancellor could have actually diffused a lot of this by answering some of these questions last week, before she went to China, instead of sort of letting it all boil over and bubble up to create this sort of pressure cooker crucible of bad news, which she is now having to defend on those green benches.
Maybe she was hoping people would, calm down for a few days. It wouldn't be as robust. But Mel Stride was pretty robust.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the Chancellor can't really control that much about what happens in the money markets. I mean, the Chancellor can try and give as stable as an impression of what's going on or whatever, but as long as these international lenders decide that the UK is less credible in terms of its ability to pay back debt, then those costs will rise.
But isn't that all based on confidence, though? And she's made decisions that make confidence in our country as somewhere to invest, somewhere to grow a business, somewhere to trust, for being good for borrowing, for being good to pay back their debt. That's because of Rachel Reeves' decisions, no?
Well, yeah, I mean,
at least.
Hugely, you can argue, yes, the tens of billions of extra borrowing in the budget, the change of that debt rule so that debt was measured in a different way, allowing for, over 20 billion extra in borrowing in this year alone. I mean, that clearly has had an effect. That's clearly meant that when the international market moves in the way that we saw last week, the UK is more vulnerable than other countries because we've taken on more debt. That is, of course, an environment of the Chancellor's making, but that's how you sail into the storm, right? You set your ship and you try and cork the hulls and do whatever else it is during your budget, and then all of these different ships, all of these different countries sail together into that storm. If you haven't corked the hulls properly in your budget, you're going to have a tougher time riding out that storm.
Well, yes, absolutely. So Rachel Reeves being asked lots of questions today in the House of Commons. First time we've seen her since her trip to China. We didn't see her at that urgent question before her trip to China. Sources have been briefing the papers that Rachel Reeves isn't in a fantastic place at the moment, depressed even.
Shall we just listen into Richard Tice?
Let's do that.
It's going down. And the markets are expressing their clear concerns, the currency markets, the bond markets, in selling off, that actually there is no growth and that the economy continues to fall. If the Chancellor is so confident, can she confirm to the House when the economy will start growing again?
Chancellor. I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. Growth is the #1 mission of this Labour government. But the truth is, it's not possible to turn things around quickly after 14 years of lacklustre growth and declining living standards from the party opposite. But we're leaving no stone unturned, which is why last week in China we secured £600 million worth of tangible benefits for the UK economy, helping great British businesses exporting overseas.
Nestle Calix-Scan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Chancellor agree with me that developing our economic and trading relationships with other nations is one of many important levers? And alongside...
Well, there was the Chancellor's response to the Deputy Leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, saying that it takes a long time to turn around a ship. The problem is that for a lot of independent observers, the ship hasn't been slowly turning in the right direction, it's been slowly turning in the wrong direction, at least when it comes to growth, which was, at least we had a, 0 point whatever growth before the election, now we're 0 point nothing.
Yes, well, let's speak to former Labour Minister Dennis McShane. Dennis, give us a defence of Rachel Reeves then.
It's fascinating for me looking at this as an old parliamentarian how empty the Tory benches are, and it's Reform, Richard Tice and other old friends making a lot of the noise. Now, there are problems, but we all praised George Osborne when he went to China to bring business back for Britain, and now Rachel Reeves is doing the same, and suddenly it's a crime against the British way of life. I think they've got it out of perspective. I think they also are failing to acknowledge the very dire straits so many people in Britain are. Poverty, child poverty, malnutrition, services being cut because of the Tory inheritance. I think they're, as it were, coming at Rachel really rather too early in the search. She's unpopular at the moment, everybody knows that, but give me a Chancellor who's ever popular.
Is it going to be credible for the entirety of this Parliament, whenever something goes wrong, the Chancellor simply says it's the last guy's fault? I mean, how long can that genuinely last?
When we went into power in 1997, I asked exactly that same question to Jonathan Powell, who was Tony Blair's Chief of Staff. I said, Jonathan, how long can we keep on blaming the last Tory government? he said, how long were they in power? I said, 17 years. Well, that'll do for starters. So yeah, that knockabout's there. It's real. It's very acute right now. All these different stories. I mean, I heard Rupert Soames, brother of my old friend Nick Soames, a great Tory grandee. Grandfather was Winston Churchill. I remember Nick Soames telling me that his brother Rupert thought that MPs were so badly paid that an MP's pay wouldn't even cover his cartridges when he went out shooting at the weekend. So Rupert was there for some reason. He's chairman of the CBI and telling the poor to suck it up, telling the workers you can't get a pay rise, just saying...
I think the CBI would have something to say about that, Dennis. I think the CBI, who let me be clear, I don't think anyone on this channel has ever held a candle for the CBI, but, I mean, they are saying something genuine, which is business is hurting, taxes have been raised on business, business does create the growth, the wealth, the prosperity that is needed to fund public services, and it's not just tax rises that businesses are facing, they're also going to be facing a whole raft of new regulations from this government.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and that is what they say, and they've always said it. Since the days of Lloyd George, the business, and CBI didn't exist then, always opposed anything that helped workers. They opposed the minimum wage, which Labour brought in and said it
The CBI were rather positive about Rachel Reeves in the run-up to the election and the Labour offering. They gave quite positive remarks, and perhaps they've just been, unimpressed by some of the decisions that have been made since Labour got into power. But Dennis, I must say, on the point about, how long can Labour continue to blame the Conservatives? I mean, the Conservatives did. I mean, massively. I mean, on the issue of the finances, of course, but also on the issue of immigration. They said, it was Labour who opened the doors to all this immigration at the same time as they had immigration still in the hundreds of thousands and rising. So they're all at it, aren't they?
I think so. I mean, I'm not going to dispute that with you one little bit, Emily. And what I would say is I really think the Tories, I don't know whether it's because they're so nervous about Kemi Badenoch, that they are peaking far too early. I mean, they're getting up as if there's an election next May, not an election in 4 years' time. I really would pace myself. This isn't a 100-yard sprint, it's a marathon, and I don't think they're cutting through. Believe me, things like the winter fuel allowance are very unpopular with Labour voters. I know from council elections, which I observe very closely, and Rachel's taken a big risk there. But we don't want to increase taxes generally. France, Germany and Spain, when they had similar economic problems, difficulties inherited from external sources, they imposed a one-off wealth tax on the super wealthy. I mean, not any of us, and probably not very few of your viewers.
It's never any of us, is it? Until it is.
They moaned and groaned, the super rich in France, Germany and Spain, but they paid their dime, and all three countries, frankly, a lot healthier as a result. Now,
Germany's been in recession for most of the past 2 years. Their government's just collapsed. The Christian Democrats are going to come in, but the Alternative for Deutschland are doing very well because everyone in Germany feels poor. Their chemicals industry's collapsed. Their car manufacturing industry is on its knees.
Yes, that is the inheritance of Angela Merkel.
Dennis, we'll have to continue this debate another time because, unfortunately, we've run to the end of our segment here. But, Dennis, as always, thank you very much indeed, Dennis McShane. But, yes, we have some royal news to bring you because the Princess of Wales has made a heartfelt visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital in London today. She's personally thanked the staff who cared for her during her cancer treatment. Here are some pictures of her earlier today when she made this visit.
Well, a Kensington Palace spokesman said the Princess wanted to make the journey to both show her gratitude to the incredible team, but also highlight the world-leading care and treatment that Marsden provides.
So, Catherine is now to become the hospital's joint royal patron, with her husband, Prince William, already a patron.
Joining us now is our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, for more. And, Cameron, you're outside the Royal Marsden Hospital.
I am, Tom, and news is certainly starting to trickle through to the patients and members of the public outside this hospital. It has a quite poignant royal link, actually, because it was Diana, Princess of Wales, Prince William's mother, who was first the royal patron of this hospital. Then, of course, Prince William was president, and now, as you said, he is joint patron alongside the Princess of Wales, who visited here earlier today. And in fact, when the Princess arrived here, she made the remark when she was walking through the front entrance behind me that it's nice to be walking through the front front entrance, having done so many secret visits round the back during 2024, because of course this was where she was receiving her preventative chemotherapy treatments, and she did really want to thank staff who have given her the care and compassion, in Kensington Palace's words, that she really needed. She also made the point while speaking to a number of patients here earlier today that it's the loved ones of those who are receiving cancer treatments that need support just as much as the patient themselves. Of course, Prince William spoke quite candidly at the end of 2024, back in November, saying that it has been brutal and probably one of the toughest years of his life, supporting his wife, the Princess of Wales, with her cancer treatments. And this is the Princess's first solo engagement of 2025. As you mentioned, she wanted to thank staff personally for their exceptional care and compassion. She also spoke to many patients. One patient spoke to her and said, "I think you managed the children amazingly well during the course of your treatment and your cancer recovery." She said that's so kind, but of course made the point that all treatment is different and all families respond differently to it. She also met a therapy dog inside the hospital as well, and hugged a patient at the end, saying that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that you're in the best possible hands. That was a very emotional moment. I think there's still photographs which hopefully we just brought you, I think, tell their own story here. But royal sources are still remaining very cautious and urging us to be cautious with the princess's ongoing recovery. She said back in September she wasn't out of the woods yet. They are saying that it's going to be a gradual return to public duties for the Princess of Wales. Of course, she said she still has good days and bad days with her health. This was an unannounced visit. We only found out really a few minutes before the Princess departed. So keeping each day as it comes, but international travel for now is off the table, which does contradict what Prince William told us in November.
Very interesting. Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed, our royal correspondent there outside the hospital that Kate visited earlier today.
Yeah, much more to come here on Good Afternoon Britain. Do not go anywhere. We're going to be back, of course, in the House of Commons, where the Chancellor is still on her feet, defending, well, her handling of the last week or so of economic turmoil. The money markets taking a dim view of her borrowing plans. The cost of that borrowing has risen by £12 billion this year. Yes, those debt interest payments rising, and clearly a difficult time for the Chancellor to defend all of this on her feet there in the House of Commons. Much more on this developing story after your weather forecast.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. High pressure will be firmly in control for many of us as we go through the rest of this week, and so it's going to be often dry but quite cloudy with that as well. The high pressure currently sitting just to the south of us, and we do actually have a weak front lingering across central parts, and this is bringing some thick cloud and some drizzly rain as we go through the rest of today. A lot of cloud then to come as we go through the evening, though some clear skies across some parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England overnight, and here temperatures may take a bit of a drop, perhaps a touch of frost where we get some clear skies. But for many, with the thick cloud and some spots of drizzly rain, it is going to be a mild night, markedly milder than last night for many southern parts. If we take a closer look at first thing tomorrow morning, and while it is going to be a grey start to the day across much of England and Wales, some thick clouds, so there could be a bit of damp weather around, and over the hills some low cloud bringing some hill fog in places too. A much brighter start though across Northern Ireland. For northern England into southern Scotland, a bit damp in places where the cloud's thick enough, and then maybe some bright weather around eastern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning, but for many it is going to be pretty grey and cloudy. As we go through the day though, we are going to see increasing amounts of sunshine across parts of the north and west. So yes, Northern Ireland having lots of sunshine through the day, but across Scotland it's going to turn increasingly sunny through the day, and also western parts of England and Wales seeing some sunshine breaking through, but further south northeast, it's staying grey and cloudy. Temperatures will be a little bit above average for the time of year, especially towards the north, widely getting into double figures. But there will be some strong winds towards the northwest, and as we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more rain pushing into the far northwest of Scotland as well. Later on through the rest of the week, a lot of cloud to come, particularly Friday and Saturday, but it's also worth noting that our temperatures are going to start to drop again, so we'll see the return of some frost. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 14th of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
To go or not to go? Will Rachel Reeves last as Chancellor after being called to step down from her post? She's live in the Commons.
Is the Hamlet of our time. They promised the electorate much while pouring the poison into their ear. To go or not to go? That is now a question.
OK, and in a GB News exclusive, a consultant to the 2022 National Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse says there is no clear evidence that abusers are coming together in networks defined by their ethnic origin and that more data needs to be gathered. We'll be hearing from her as she calls for the end to the politicisation of the issue.
Where do these abusers come from? Very, very poor sort of peasant background, very, very rural.
Elsewhere, the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, has exclusively told GB News that peasants from sub-communities are the ones in grooming rape gangs and that a national inquiry would seek to identify those in authority who did not act.
It is free speech under attack. Pubs could be forced to ban customers from discussing controversial topics like religion and transgender rights due to Labour's proposed workers' rights reforms. I can't get over that. Can you imagine if you're a bartender and you've heard something going on about transgender rights and you hear something, oh, that sounds a little bit transphobic, or they shouldn't be delving into that issue so loudly. Off they go. Can you please be quiet or you're banned from the pub? I mean, seriously, that's uncomfortable for everyone involved, isn't it?
Absolutely, not least the landlord, who probably would hate to do such a thing, but is worried because this new workers' rights reform has been passed, that if there is a hostile environment created for his employees, if there's something that might offend his employees that is said in his workplace, somehow that's on him.
Crazy.
That's not on the customers. That's not on the... I mean,
these landlords have been pummeled in all directions. Rising taxes, high energy costs, the pandemic and everything that came with that. They're closing at a rate of knots. And then there's this.
It's a bonkers situation, but that's not the last of it. I mean, you look at this big roster of, I'm going to put them in inverted commas, rights. You know, this ban...
Too many rights.
This ban on 0 hours contracts. I was on a 0 hours contract throughout university. It was useful because...
What did you do?
I worked in a bar.
Oh.
And it was useful because sometimes I had to actually do some work and I couldn't work in the bar, and other times I wanted to work in the bar. I didn't want a regular contract. Hundreds of thousands of workers don't want a regular contract. They want to pick and choose. That's what 0 hours allows you to do.
I did the waitressing. I was terrible at it. Yeah, no
Really?
balance with the plates.
Oh,
I couldn't
no,
hold
that.
more than, X amount of plates on my arm,
See, at least behind a bar,
I
you don't
spilled
have to
gravy all
carry...
down a gentleman's back. His wife was very displeased.
Gosh.
Sorry if you're watching.
Were you on a 0 hours contract?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
See, I mean, these are super useful contracts for people who are starting out in work or doing studying on the side or doing multiple jobs. I mean, just restricting the ability of people to... I mean, not every 0 hours contract is some sort of exploitative regime between the big bad boss and the poor worker. Sometimes workers want these things. These are mutually agreed contracts. Anyway.
Yeah, well, anyway, on that note, gbnews.com/your say, let us know, how would you feel if you were banned from a pub because you had a controversial conversation? Anyway, let's get the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Emily, thank you. It's just gone 2 o'clock. These are your headlines. Rachel Reeves has faced a grilling from MPs in the Commons as she delivered a statement on her recent trip to China, criticised by political opponents for coinciding with a week of financial turmoil. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride slammed Ms Reeves for disappearing to China and updated the Chancellor on the mess she had left behind, calling the economic situation a crisis made in Downing Street. Ms Reeves defended her position and hailed agreements she reached during her visit to China.
The opportunity to make working people off by making Britain better off. That is the mandate that this government has, and this is what we will deliver.
Despite calls for her sacking, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that Ms Reeves will stay in post until the next election. But Mr Stride finished his questioning, referring the Chancellor's situation to Shakespeare's Hamlet, saying the British people deserve better.
To go or not to go, that is now a question. The Prime Minister will be damned if he does, but he will surely be damned if he does not. The British people deserve better.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested Israel and Hamas could agree a Gaza ceasefire by the end of the week. It comes after US President Joe Biden said a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink. The outgoing US leader made the claim during his final foreign policy address before he leaves office next week. A round of Gaza ceasefire talks are resuming in Doha today to finalise the remaining details of the deal. In other news, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has described meeting survivors of grooming gangs in Oldham and Rotherham as quite shocking. Speaking to GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, she said she believed a new national inquiry should look at what she called a systematic pattern of behaviour among certain communities in the country.
I'm not afraid to look into this. I don't care what people call me, whether they say I'm jumping on a far-right bandwagon or I'm just doing it for politics. This is something that I've been talking about for a while. I said it in my big leadership speech. This was something I wanted to look at. But if you look at it, there is a systematic pattern of behaviour, not even just from one country, but from sub-communities within those countries, people with a particular background, particular class background, work background.
What background is that?
You know, people very, very poor sort of peasant background, very, very rural. This is about those victims who deserve justice, the survivors who deserve justice.
It comes after the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, joined growing calls for a full investigation, saying nothing less will restore faith in our safeguarding systems. Now the people of Los Angeles are bracing for stronger winds as wildfires continue, with at least 24 people killed and more than 100,000 told to evacuate. LA Mayor Karen Bass said urgent preparations are being made ahead of near hurricane-force winds predicted to peak today. Authorities also announced 9 people were arrested for looting and 1 for arson. Host of the People Politics podcast in Los Angeles, Paul Duddridge, said residents are braced for more winds overnight.
The actual expression I'm hearing from the Met Office, or the equivalent over here, is we can expect tonight explosive fire growth. That's what the potential is, explosive fire growth. So just when you think things are perhaps getting a little bit better, overnight now we are due 70-mile-an-hour winds, which will fuel a fire that is still only 14% contained after a week.
2 women have been charged with criminal damage after Just Stop Oil protesters spray-painted Charles Darwin's grave in Westminster Abbey yesterday. The climate activists marked the slogan 1.5 is dead in chalk paint on the 19th century biologist's grave at about 9:30 a.m. The Met Police said 66-year-old Alison Lee and 77-year-old Diane Bly will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 11th and 12th of February. The Princess of Wales has made a surprise visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital to thank staff who looked after her during her cancer treatment. Princess Kate also met other patients at the London hospital. The visit marks the first confirmation of where she was treated. A Kensington Palace spokesperson said the Princess wanted to make the journey to both show her gratitude to the incredible team, but also highlight the world-leading care and treatment the Marsden provides. Catherine is now becoming the hospital's joint royal patron, with her husband, Prince William, already a patron. And we bring you some sad breaking news now. The comedian and actor Tony Slattery has died aged 65 following a heart attack. That's according to his partner. Slattery appeared on Channel 4 comedy improvisation show Whose Line Is It Anyway? And comedy shows Have I Got News For You? He was the former president of the improvisation group Cambridge Footlights and had recently been touring a comedy show in England. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes past 2, and will she stay or will she go?
Sounds like something out of Shakespeare, doesn't it? In the last hour, the Chancellor has been updating the Commons following her trip to China. She says agreements reached will unlock £1 billion for the UK economy and allow Britain to be a key player in new markets.
However, her Conservative counterpart, Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, channelled his inner Shakespeare to call on the Chancellor to go.
Mr. Speaker, this whole sorry tale is nothing short of a Shakespearean tragedy. Playing out before our eyes, this is the Hamlet of our time. They promised the electorate much while pouring the poison into their ear. To go or not to go, that is now a question.
OK, well, that was the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride. Should we speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's outside Downing Street? Christopher, a lot of anticipation to see Rachel Reeves for the first time since her trip to China. She, of course, avoided that urgent question on the economy last week. How do you think it went for her?
Well, I think this is the start of what is the Treasury fight back after the PM had to give confidence eventually that the Chancellor would be in that role till the end, till the next election. I think the effort now by the Treasury is putting her back on the front foot. She's told MPs just now she'll go further and faster in the face of the market turmoil we've seen to reassure MPs and deal with and get growth going. We're expecting to hear from Darren Jones, who's her number 2, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, possibly as soon as tomorrow. And then next week, we're expecting to make a speech again on growth. And we're looking forward into this March 26th update on the economy. And after that, a spending review and also a separate review on defence spending. I think they recognise that they've been a bit too quiet on the economy, I suspect, and that's why they're going all in. They're saying here to MPs this afternoon, we're hearing from Rachel Reeves, she's now refused to rule out a March budget, having said there'll be no budget until November or October this year. That is surprising. We are expecting only one fiscal event so far this year. We're also hearing she tells critics to get real, to understand the predicament the country's in. She can't write or guarantee spending for 4 or 5 years after just 6 months. She wants to get there slowly and carefully. And she's working closely with Andrew Bailey, of course. He's the governor of the Bank of England. Many of those with mortgages were expecting 2 or 3 cuts in interest rates this year with inflation back under control. Now fears that won't happen. And that's why that relationship between Andrew Bailey, who is safe in his job, by the way, until the end of the decade, under an Act of Parliament, the relationship between him and Rachel Reeves will be coming under a lot of scrutiny in coming weeks and months.
Stuff there, Chris. Pretty dramatic moment in the House of Commons too, and this idea that there might now be a sort of mini budget, to coin a phrase, to try and settle some of this market turmoil halfway through the period we were expecting no budget at all. How likely do you think that is now?
Well, we don't know. The first we've heard of it is this lunchtime. It is not expected. We were expecting to have a fiscal event, they call that's the name for a budget, in October. Nick Timothy, the Tory MP, he said, can you rule out new tax rises or departmental spending in the March statement, or will that fiscal forecast become an emergency budget? Ms Reeves said, we have committed to do just one budget per year to provide companies with the certainties. We'll update on the OBR in March. She also added, we've set out the fiscal rules that will balance day-to-day spending and will get debt down. So the point here in the world of politics, she didn't rule it out. She said there'll be an update in March, but didn't rule out the suggestion from a Tory MP that there could be a budget. So she's not saying there will be one, Tom and Emily, just not ruling it out. And that's why our ears prick up here in politics.
Yes, and with things as they are, I guess if there were to be a bit of an emergency budget, that could include huge spending cuts or tax rises. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor outside Downing Street for us.
Well, we're now going to cross to to our Westminster studio, where the chief political correspondent at the Times, Aubrey Allegretti, is waiting for us. Aubrey, start with this question that Mel Stride raised in the House of Commons. Should the Chancellor stay or go or not to go? Should she take arms up against this sea of troubles?
Well, we saw a very defiant and confident performance from Rachel Reeves, which is particularly important because she has not just got the waiting public and MPs, raising questions about her performance and economic growth and stability in this country, given the state of the markets over the last few weeks. She's also obviously got those city traders nervously watching and waiting and looking for any sort of signs of weakness or the potential that there might be another sort of fiscal event in the spring, which is not what the government had planned or intended for. So we have seen lots of Labour MPs rallying around her, but there is a sort of concerted effort by senior government figures to make sure that this performance projects great strength. I suppose the concerns are that people say it's not delivering what they intended, and they think that actually ultimately replacing her isn't a sort of Westminster gossip rumour mill conversation at the moment, but who would they really replace her with when Sir Keir Starmer is so closely attached to Rachel Reeves that replacing her would really not do anything other than just change the person at the top. So that's why they say actually the prospect of her going anywhere in the next 12 months seems pretty remote, even if people are unhappy.
Although I think it was a couple of days ago that a source close to the Treasury was briefing your paper saying that Rachel Reeves was a bit depressed and that she didn't really know which direction to go in with regards to spending cuts or tax rises, and she felt a little stuck.
I think it's true to say that she is somebody who was quite popular in the parliamentary party. During the general election campaign, she did an awful lot of fundraising for candidates. And I speak to people who say, actually, now is the moment where she is having to rely on that sort of political capital more than at any point since the general election. We obviously know that she announced a budget which had some hiccups afterwards. They probably weren't expecting the backlash they got over the change for inheritance tax to farmers. And there's certainly been a lot of anger at winter fuel allowance being cut for most pensioners, and the WASPy Women decision as well. But this is a really tricky period she's going to have to navigate now. And how she does so, retaining the confidence of those MPs, is really important. Not just for her, but to Keir Starmer, because they are so tied at the hip.
I suppose the irony is all of those three policy decisions that you've made are ones that the markets might quite like in terms of fiscal consolidation. And it's all the ones that the MPs and the postbags of these MPs have been saying, you know, that you should do, that the markets don't like. And there are these two intractable issues. But amidst it all, a new poll out last night for your newspaper, which showed for the first time Reform just 1 point away from the Labour Party. I mean, we're really entering a world of three-party politics in a way that perhaps we haven't seen before.
Certainly not in a long time. And I mean, this is going to be very uncomfortable reading for really all of the main political parties. Although I would temper that by saying that actually people in Labour say that 6 months after the 2010 general election, Labour began to outpoll the Conservatives who were then in government and continued to outpoll them almost to the month up until May 2015, when the next general election was held and, as many people will remember, Labour lost and the Conservatives consolidated their position and got a majority in Parliament. So you have lots of people saying it's only 6 months in, this is a 4.5 year to 5 year project. Lots of people close to Sir Keir Starmer saying, look, we need to not listen to what they call the turn that frown upside down brigade. The Labour MPs that they think are sort of harping on about the government not being positive and optimistic enough about what could come next. And they say, actually, again, if you look back at 2010, the Conservatives made some really difficult, unpopular decisions instituting austerity. They then went on to perform better at the next election. So they really want Labour MPs to hold their nerve. Whether they can, though, is another matter, because what we're likely to see over the next sort of 6 months is Reform continuing on the warpath to make grounds in council seats at the local elections in the spring. And that kind of momentum behind Nigel Farage is going to be very difficult to counter, not only for Keir Starmer, but of course also for Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, who is trying to show that actually it's only with that consolidation on the right that can the Conservatives get back into power again. The question will be whether or not they might only be able to achieve it with the help of Nigel Farage and the Reform in an official or unofficial electoral pact come next time.
That's something that Keir Starmer will be thinking about too, I'm sure. Aubrey Allegretti, thank you very much indeed, Chief Political Correspondent at The Times. I must say quite a few of you are picking up on Rachel Reeves in the front bench appearing to make this all a laughing matter, appearing to laugh. Yes, Brian says the Labour government think it's funny that the British economy is in trouble and the pound is falling. I don't think they think it's funny, but yes, I think laughing when it's a statement about this state of the economy isn't always a great look, is it?
I don't know. I don't think that's... I think if you were to watch the statement in its entirety, she was very, very serious in her first element of it, which was clearly the talking about the China trip and the state of the economy. Then Mel Stride. Then the Shadow Chancellor comes up and does this, let's face it, quite funny speech that was politically devastating, particularly because you could listen to it so easily, and it included all these sort of, allusions to literature and all the rest of it, and Peking duck. Of course, then the Chancellor comes back at that with something that's a little bit more light-hearted too. I don't think that we should find that particularly surprising.
Do you want more banter, not less?
More banter in politics, always, forever and a day.
OK, well, let us know what you think. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. In a GB News exclusive, a consultant to the 2022 National Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse says there is no clear evidence that abusers are coming together in networks defined by their ethnic origin. That's to come.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support. It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down that boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. Much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over, but the idea of this shop-centred high street finished, that's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, it's 2:24. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, a consultant to the 2022 National Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse has told GB News that more data needs to be gathered because there is no clear evidence yet that abusers are coming together in networks defined by their ethnic origin.
Well, Lucy Duckworth, who advised the inquiry that heard that testimony from dozens of victims, says the politicisation of the issue needs to stop and that using race as an aggravating factor is wrong. Well, she's been speaking exclusively to GB News' science and health editor, Lucy Johnson.
I've heard people say, we know for a fact that people of certain origins are making our children unsafe. We don't have that data, and it's really important we know that. What we do know is that perpetrators of child sexual abuse or child sexual exploitation will come together in organised networks, and it is not defined by their ethnic origin or by their job. I mean, if we're talking about organised networks, We can see that in the Church of England. There are groups of priests who have got together to abuse children and are continuing to do so, as we know from the press over the Christmas period where that was admitted. Organised networks of child abuse are everywhere. They're in every single institution, and we have to start understanding that it's all abhorrent and it needs to stop. This politicisation and this using race as an aggravating factor currently is incorrect because we don't have that data. And it was one of the key recommendations of the inquiry that we do start gathering data so we can better understand patterns and intervene earlier.
OK, well, that was Lucy Duckworth, a consultant to the 2022 inquiry into child sexual exploitation. With us in the studio is Lucy Johnston, our science and health editor, who spoke to her. Now, this sort of it's important to hear different voices on this issue, because there's been a lot of talk about whether we should be speaking about the ethnic background of the perpetrators of these specific crimes, whether we should be looking at child sexual exploitation as a whole. What did you make of what she said there?
Well, I think that they're frustrated. That inquiry went on for 7 years, 5 years, and talked to 7,000 victims, and there were really good recommendations that were made, and nothing was done for 2 years. It's only now that the government is engaging to bring in those recommendations. And I think the point they're making is that that was looked at. There are abuse networks all over the country. There are new figures actually now. We do have up-to-date data that does suggest, you know, there is a high level of white male people operating in gangs. So to sort of cherry-pick one group is, at the moment, not necessarily appropriate because we don't have the data to suggest that that is where we need to look. There are online grooming gangs. There are, of course, you know, problems in the church, problems in boarding schools and everywhere. So what they're saying is that we need action now. We don't need rhetoric. And this rhetoric is just enticing people. It's click hate. It's aggravating racial problems and tensions, and it will do no good. It's more harmful. It's doing more harm than good, and it's re-traumatising victims. That's what they're saying.
Of course, the previous government set up the grooming gang task force. It arrested 550 people in its first year, finding specifically this issue with majority Pakistani communities. But then it sort of run out of time in the Parliament to implement any of the recommendations of the inquiry. I mean, I think I'm right in saying the Bill Minister, Chris Philp, who's now the Shadow Home Secretary, was trying to implement at least a few of the recommendations from the report, and then the election came and it all got lost in the wash-up process. It seems strange that actually it's only now that the Pakistani grooming gang issue has reached the media that this Labour government is now looking to implement the recommendations of the report in full. Do we know what the people behind the report think of that?
So the grooming gang task force, are you talking about the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse?
No, the task force was a separate institution set up by the government.
By Suella Braverman, yeah.
Right, OK, yeah. So two different things. And again, we still don't have enough data to know whether some groups are disproportionately represented or not. Or that doesn't mean to say there isn't a problem within gangs and within Pakistani groups as well. Both things can be true.
I think,
but the point is, yes, we don't know. We have no idea why nothing was done. And I know that the groups say they have visited, 7 Home Office ministers. They've banged on the doors of so many politicians, and they were, doors were shut. It is extraordinary that only now they are engaging, and one has to wonder whether the media has got something to do with that.
I think this is one of the problems with the inquiry in 2022, that it looked at child sexual exploitation across the board. It looked at the church, it looked at Jimmy Savile, it looked at other types of sexual abuse. It didn't mention grooming gangs particularly, and that's a specific type of on-street, group-localised sexual exploitation that unfortunately in towns and cities was predominantly by Pakistani men. And that's what people are calling for in terms of a new inquiry, looking into that specific type of grooming. Because if you look at the convictions, predominantly Pakistani men or from Pakistani heritage men. So it's sort of, yes, you can look at child sexual exploitation as a whole, but there will always be different factors at play, different cultural factors. There may be uncomfortable truths when it comes to ethnicity or religious background and things, and those should all be looked at.
Well, I don't think
given
it's
enough
true
time.
to say that it's predominantly Pakistani men across the country that are involved in this. I don't think we have that evidence. It may be in some pockets that we can pick data that shows that. I don't know that. I mean, I'll be interested to see. But grooming gangs or networks of gangs that abuse children is a tiny proportion of sexual abuse. And in fact, the latest figures, we do have figures now, most of that, gangs that network and abuse children are predominantly white. That is what we have in this
And we
country.
do know absolutely that the vast majority of child abuse happens between people who know each other in family networks and that sort of...
Online abuse is now the biggest worry, I think, for that, for the inquiry people. They're just saying this is a huge problem. No one's really looking at it. And you can just get for 3p or whatever, for a pound, watch some, young child having all sorts of things done.
But
that's going
we know
on now.
about this specific type of sexual exploitation that, unfortunately, in a lot of communities, towns and cities around this country, and we've heard it from the sources, we've heard it from transcripts, etc., that police were wary of getting involved because of fears over racial tensions or community tensions and the like, or being seen to be racist. Social workers didn't speak up about it for that very reason, because of political correctness. It's so much more complicated. And I do think that if there's going to be... I do think that one inquiry on the entirety of child sexual exploitation is not specific enough to this particular problem. That's not to say that other child sexual exploitation doesn't matter. Of course, it absolutely does. And we need to probe anywhere that it's taking place.
The inquiry
but this
did
is
look at that.
specific type of grooming.
It did look at that, and it said that it wasn't called out and there was political correctness, and that is appalling. And that is true. It's absolutely true, and it should be called out. But they say that to go back over again and do another inquiry, which will take a number of years, that inquiry cost £180 million. If we go back over it, you're going to hit the same walls. You're not going to get over the problems that they faced in gathering the data. It will waste time and resources and attention from what actually needs to be done, which is putting the very recommendations in place that are to try and stop these gangs and to stop, to encourage and educate people not to cover up, not to be politically correct, so that they don't call out things when they see them. That's what's important now.
Well, I think everyone can agree with that one, that's for sure. Lucy Johnston, thank you very much indeed for coming in. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up. What have we got coming up?
It certainly is. Well, extremist scaremongering. Well, is it extremist scaremongering to suggest the UK is close to experiencing blackouts? Well, that's what an energy minister has said in the last 24 hours. But how close to these blackouts really are we? More on that after your headlines.
Good afternoon. Your headlines at 2:32. Rachel Reeves has faced a grilling from MPs in the Commons as she delivered a statement on her recent trip to China, criticised by political opponents for coinciding with a week of financial turmoil. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride slammed Ms Reeves for disappearing to China and updated the Chancellor on what he called the mess she left behind, calling the economic situation a crisis made in Downing Street. Ms Reeves defended her position and hailed agreements she reached during her visit to China.
The opportunity to make working people off by making Britain better off. That is the mandate that this government has, and this is what we will deliver.
Despite calls for her sacking, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted that Ms Reeves will stay in post until the next election. But Mr Stride finished his questioning, referring the Chancellor's situation to Shakespeare's Hamlet, saying the British people deserve better.
To go or not to go, that is now a question. The Prime Minister will be damned if he does, but he will surely be damned if he does not. The British people deserve better.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
In other news, US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested Israel and Hamas could agree a Gaza ceasefire by the end of the week. It comes after US President Joe Biden said a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal is on the brink. The outgoing US leader made the claim during his final foreign policy address before he leaves office next week. A round of Gaza ceasefire talks are resuming in Doha today to finalise the remaining details of the deal. The Princess of Wales has made a surprise visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital to thank staff who looked after her during her cancer treatment. Princess Kate also met other patients at the London hospital. The visit marks the first confirmation of where she was treated. A Kensington Palace spokesperson said the princess wanted to make the journey to both show her gratitude to the incredible team, but also to highlight the world-leading care and treatment that Marsden provides. Catherine is now becoming the hospital's joint royal patron, with her husband, Prince William, already a patron. The comedian and actor Tony Slattery has died at the age of 65 following a heart attack, his partner has announced. Slattery appeared on the Channel 4 comedy improvisation show Whose Line Is It Anyway? And comedy shows Have I Got News For You? He was the former president of the improvisation group Cambridge Footlights and had recently been touring a comedy show in England. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Sam Francis will have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hey, here's your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. There will be some sunshine around in a few places today, but for many it's looking pretty cloudy and there'll even be some drizzly rain, particularly across some central parts of the UK where we have a front lying here. Across southern areas, though, there is high pressure, and with this high pressure, things are looking pretty calm. There's even going to be some sunshine across southern counties, particularly south of the M4. Further north, quite a bit more cloud, and like I say, some drizzly rain, though some sunshine breaking out across eastern parts of Scotland and northeast England as well. It is going to be relatively mild for many of us, especially towards the north. Temperatures widely getting into double figures, a little bit fresher, a little bit chillier than this further south. Now, as we head through into this evening, and there will be some clear skies across parts of Scotland, some high-level cloud, but not especially thick. So you may see the stars, you may see the moon, which is pretty much at full moon at the moment. Some drizzly rain pushing into parts of northwest Scotland, and here there will be a brisk breeze as well. Across Northern Ireland, it's going to be a fairly cloudy end to the day, and across northwest England and much of the rest of England and Wales, it's also looking pretty cloudy and a bit damp in places too. Some breaks, though, to start the night as we go across northeast England. As we go through the night, though, we are going to see quite a bit of cloud for many places. There will still be some breaks towards eastern parts of Scotland, northeast England perhaps, and here we're likely to see temperatures dropping a little bit lower than elsewhere, but for many with the cloud and some relatively mild air across us, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. That being said, there could still be a touch of frost where we get those clear skies and even a few fog patches too. I think it's going to be the low cloud perhaps that will be causing more of the visibility issues, so high ground areas likely to have some hill fog in places, and it is going to be a cloudy start to the day tomorrow, but turning brighter with increasing amounts of sunshine across northern and western areas in particular, and again pretty mild with temperatures above average. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. The M90 in Perth and Kinross is closed in both directions over Friarton Bridge between junctions 10 and 11 between Craigend and Perth. It's after a fire under the bridge earlier, so long delays on approaches to the closure. And as you divert, there are delays of up to 55 minutes with some cancelled trains between York and Darlington because of a faulty train, and train services are suspended between Tyseley and Lapworth after a freight train broke down. In Cambridgeshire, the A10 is closed in both directions between Littleport and Ely after an accident. In Monmouthshire, the A40 is blocked westbound by an accident at the Gibraltar tunnels in Monmouth, causing queues. And from Surrey into West Sussex, the A24 is closed in both directions between Parks Green roundabout at Capel and Kingsfold after an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 2, and in some cheery news for you, the energy giant Centrica has warned over the weekend that we're now less than 1 week's supply left at the largest gas storage site in the UK.
Yeah, 1 week's supply left. Great. But despite this, the government has announced its growth-boosting plan is to plough ahead with AI data centre revolution.
Well, the trouble with this plan? Well, these data centres are incredibly power-hungry. Some in the US are planning to be run off their own dedicated nuclear power stations. So how on earth can the UK keep up with AI if we're so energy poor?
Well, joining us now is writer Ross Clark, who's written on this exact problem. Ross, is this an oversight? So we've got this big AI revolution coming, or at least that's what the government wants, but we don't have the cheap energy to go with it.
Yes, great AI revolution coming. It's going to repair our potholes, apparently, and allow teachers to better teaching plans and so on. But there is, as you say, a bit of a hole in the plan. AI is incredibly power hungry. You wouldn't think so because there's no great smokestacks of sort of brickworks and cement works of old, but it does use a lot of power. According to the International Energy Agency in 2022, AI, cryptocurrency and data centres between them consume 2% of global electricity. That's more than Germany uses, for example. And if you want to expand AI in Britain, you're going to want a reliable and cheap energy system, and we have neither. You want to commercial energy prices in Britain are the highest of any member of the International Energy Agency. Commercial users are paying between 5 and 6 times as much for their energy per unit as those in the US. And there's the question mark over the security of energy. In West London, we've had a lot of data centres built in recent years. Government wants to build even more, but they've taken up all the capacity of the grid to the point that...
What is a data centre? I'm imagining some sort of office block on the outskirts of Slough or something, where people are...
That's where they are.
Like, is that...
There aren't people there, it's just banks and banks and banks of computers.
There's nobody there working. It's just computers.
Yeah, it's where all the computing is done, essentially. Yeah, yes, yeah. But, you know, these data centres gobbled up all the capacity of the grid to the point where the house builders now have been told that you can't build any homes in West London for the next 10 years because, you know, there's no capacity in the grid. So where there's going to be this capacity for the extra AI, I don't know.
Yeah, and this is the crazy thing, that the AI plan sort of is set about clean energy, specifically clean energy. In the United States, they're going prodigiously for gas. They're fracking gas and they're doing... But because they know that with AI expansion, it's not like a linear growth path. It's an exponential. If you want to make an AI system that's twice as good, you need twice as much compute. You need twice as much energy. And every time you bring out a new AI system, it's going to be roughly twice as much energy, twice as much compute. It's very easy to see. I mean, new AI systems are coming out, what, every 3 months at the moment, maybe every 6 months for the big players, for the frontier AI companies. If we're doubling the energy need for what is about 2% in the United States right now, if that is doubling every 3 or 6 months, I mean, you're going to get to the point where, in a decade's time, you're going to need to double your energy capacity.
Yeah, and if you read the government's AI strategy published yesterday, it is extraordinary. They want to create these AI growth zones. They said, well, our first one's going to be in Culham, in Oxfordshire. Now, Culham, if you know, is the home of Britain's nuclear fusion experimental station. And this plan actually says, oh, we're going to use nuclear fusion energy to power our data centres. Well, you know, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? If we could crack nuclear fusion, we wouldn't even need an AI industry. That would be a brilliant industry of its own. But of course, we've been trying for 60 years, and absolutely nobody thinks it's going to be. We can have nuclear fusion commercial power before the 2040s at the very, very earliest.
Just very quickly, one thing that Ed Miliband could do tomorrow that might put us in a better place.
Resign.
OK, well, there we go. Ross Clark.
In a word.
Thank you very much indeed for coming into the studio. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to zoom over to Birmingham now, because bin workers there are on strike as part of their series of walkouts over pay and conditions.
Yes, so 350 workers voted for this industrial action last month in a dispute that would see 150 roles at Birmingham City Council downgraded. So are they right to take the stand, or is it all a load of rubbish?
Well, our very own reporter Jack Carson joins us now. Jack, what's going on?
Well, this is today, this second day of industrial action. It's out of a total of 12 that's going to be continuing all the way into the start of April. As you mentioned, more than 300 Unite members walking out today in support of that strike, which Unite say is actually of the council's own doing. It's over the plans to remove what's known as a waste recycling collection officer role. The unions say that is a safety critical role. It's to do with ensuring the health and safety requirements are met when managing, of course, those bin lorries and that heavy machinery to ensure the safety of those staff. But it's also causing worry within communities across the city as to whether waste is going to even be collected at all if it's fallen on this strike. People have been taking it into their own hands to quite an extreme level. As you can probably see here beside us, this huge pile of rubbish which has piled up over the past few days because people are worried that if their bins aren't collected, they can't fit things in their wheelie bins. Some people have taken the decision just to dump it anywhere. But Onain Kassab is the national lead officer of Unite. We spoke to him on the picket line this morning about
our priority is always our members' pay and conditions, and what's happening in Birmingham in the refuse service is an absolute outrage, where the council have decided that our members are going to have to face a pay cut. That is absolutely unacceptable. We will not stand by while our members are punished with pay cuts, and that's why our members are taking strike action. That's why they're going to continue to get 100% support from Unite.
Obviously, the council have been in a difficult financial position over the last year. They might say that this is one of those tough decisions that has to be taken in order to continue to be able to fund services across the council. What would you say to that kind of claim?
We're sick and tired of hearing about tough decisions and about the people who have to bear the brunt of those tough decisions. Why is it always working people, pensioners, who have to pay the price for those tough decisions? So we are not accepting that in any way whatsoever. These are political choices. Local authorities can choose, instead of making cuts, they can choose to actually stand up. They can actually choose to fight and demand the funding for local government that is necessary so that we don't have pay cuts and so that services can be provided.
Well, you heard there from Onain, this is a political choice for him that this council have made. They say they are supporting those 170 plus workers who could well see a £8,000 pay cut because of the changing in working arrangements. They say 130 people of those have already taken on different options, whether it is driving training, voluntary redundancy or other different options. But it has meant that the issue of fly tipping in Birmingham has increased. You can just see here an example of some really extreme fly tipping. The council say that they won't hesitate to prosecute if they find people responsible. When it's done on such a scale, as you can see here behind me, is there really any way the council?
Yeah, it's the broken.
Because as I mentioned, with bins not being collected in this city, many people taking this into their own hands.
It's the broken windows theory again, right? As soon as you see one piece of rubbish on the road, then you dump your rubbish. Jack Carson, thank you very much.
I take it to the dump.
Yeah, the research shows that people do, though. They copy what they see on the ground.
There's no excuse for that, in my opinion. Anyway, if you're in search of some winter sun away from Birmingham, perhaps, where the rubbish is piling up, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
If you are searching for any winter sun, you'll find it in Iberia, but it's going to be breezy in the Canaries and there'll be further showers across much of Greece. Cyprus is looking fine and warmer than average for the time of year. This area of low pressure bringing some showery rain to the south of Italy and Sicily. Balearics, Spain, Portugal, mostly fine, plenty of sunshine, but an area of showers will approach here during Thursday and Friday, making it feel a little cooler.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
You know, to call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Just gone 10 to 3. Now, British buyers will face a 100% tax on purchasing a holiday home in Spain.
Yes, this is as part of new measures by the Spanish Prime Minister to apparently address the housing crisis.
Well, the tax applies to non-EU citizens who do not already reside in Spain, and the measure is one of 12 controversial reforms aimed at tackling the issue.
OK, well, joining us now from Marbella is the Managing Director of estate agency Cloud9 Spain, Sean Woolley. I mean, Sean, this is worrying for your business, presumably.
It is, yeah. Today's not been the easiest day, I must admit. But I think when you drill down on the actual facts that we've been presented with by the Spanish PM, there's not a lot there. And that's what's been very frustrating for everyone in the industry, lawyers, estate agents, trying to find out what this 100% means, because it could be anything. It could be, you know, the worst case scenario, you buy a property at 200,000 euros and you're being asked to pay an extra 200,000 euros, or it could be something as simple as doubling the amount of council tax you pay, which for most people wouldn't be a deal breaker. It would still be bad news, but it wouldn't be as much of a deal breaker. So we're all just waiting really to find out what Pedro Sanchez was talking about. And it's rather, in my opinion, rather irresponsible and reckless of him to have announced these measures that he wanted to put forward, but actually with no fact behind them at all.
Is this all because there is quite a lot of domestic anger towards people like the Brits who come and buy Spanish houses?
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I think like most places, there's a cost of living crisis. There's pressure on the housing market, which has meant that a lot of local Spaniards can't afford to buy and rent in their chosen locations. But then you have to bear in mind, well, tourism is the #1 export of this country. And you've got to be careful what you wish for. And I think there's a way to balance it better. I'm not saying I've got the answers, but I think what we're seeing with this announcement yesterday is very much a knee-jerk reaction, which is probably not the way to go, because all it's doing is creating scare stories and scaremongering and creating havoc, really, with people's livelihoods.
Well, Sean Woolley, thank you very much indeed. Good luck to you, Managing Director of the estate agency Cloud9 Spain in Marbella. Well, there you go, turfing us out. No one's going to buy something if they have to pay 100% more.
No, absolutely nuts. Well, that's all we have time for today on Good Afternoon Britain. Thank you so much for watching, but do not go anywhere. The one and only Martin Daubney, he's up next.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. High pressure will be firmly in control for many of us as we go through the rest of this week, and so it's going to be often dry but quite cloudy with that as well. The high pressure currently sitting just to the south of us, and we do actually have a weak front lingering across